Gravity Falls aired on Disney from 2012 to 2016, ran for 40 episodes across 2 seasons, and somehow packed enough hidden lore into that small window to keep an entire generation of fans decoding messages a decade later. The show was created by Alex Hirsch, based on his own childhood with his twin sister Ariel, and built around a tourist trap called the Mystery Shack in a forest town that hides interdimensional rifts, ancient prophecies, and a triangle-shaped dream demon, born 1 trillion years before the events of the show. Every frame contains a code. Every code points to a future episode. Every future episode pays off a moment that was sitting in plain sight from the very first day the show aired. The opening theme whispers a backwards message that tells you exactly how to decode the secret at the end of the same episode. The Mystery Shack rug is shaped like the villain's bow tie. A character barely visible in the background of the first 3 episodes turns out to be a time traveler, chasing the twins through the entire run of the series. A 6-fingered hand on a journal cover gets paid off in a flashback 30 real-life episodes later. A throwaway gag about a man named Stan turns into a 40-episode lie about who he actually is. A toy in the gift shop becomes a weapon in the finale. The show buried answers in the very first frames, then made the audience earn them across 2 seasons, 2 graphic novels, a 400-page in-universe journal, and a real treasure hunt that sent fans to Japan, Russia, and the woods of Oregon. So let's talk about why this show is genius. The theme song was already spoiling the ending. The Gravity Falls theme song runs about 30 seconds, half a minute. By the time most cartoons have finished showing you the network logo, Gravity Falls has already told you exactly how the show ends, who the villain is, who's lying, and what the prophecy that defeats them looks like. You just have to know how to listen. At the very end of the theme, right after the postcard image of the town flips upward, a whisper plays. To anyone watching casually, it sounds like ambient hiss, the kind of sound design choice you'd expect from a Disney cartoon trying to seem spooky. But if you record it and play it backwards, the whisper resolves into a clear instruction. In the first 6 episodes, the reversed whisper says 3 letters back, which is the key to the Caesar cipher used to decode the message that appears at the end of each episode's credits. That's it! The show is literally telling you, in the first 30 seconds of every episode, exactly which cipher to use to unlock the secret message it's about to hide from you. And it changes. In the next batch of episodes, the whisper becomes switch A and Z, signaling the Atbash cipher, and in the last stretch of Season 1, the whisper switches again, to a clue indicating the A1Z26 cipher, where each letter is replaced by its number in the alphabet. 3 rotating ciphers, all telegraphed by a whisper that lasts less than a second, all leading to messages buried at the end of episodes that most kids fast forward through to get to the next show. The first message you decode if you actually do all of this work is also the biggest spoiler in the series. At the end of the very first episode, Tourist Trapped, the cryptogram on screen reads VWDQLVQRWZKDWKHVHPV, which when shifted 3 letters back per the whispered instruction, spells out Stan is not what he seems. Hold on to that for a second. The very first episode, episode 1 of 40, before you've even learned who Stan is, before you've met Mabel's pig, before Dipper has fully described the journal he finds in the forest, the show has already told you in code that the entire premise you're about to spend 2 seasons getting comfortable with is a lie. Stan is not Stan. The Mystery Shack is not really the Mystery Shack. The man running the tourist trap is hiding something so big that the show waits 30 more episodes to confirm it. It gets crazier when you realize how many fans cracked this code in real time. Online forums dedicated to the show in 2012 and 2013 were already passing around full decoded transcripts of every cryptogram by the time the Season 1 finale aired, a scene featuring a rainbow-puking gnome at the end of the credits. In the first episode hid another cipher message that, once decoded, simply read "Welcome to Gravity Falls." A welcome mat written in code. That's the level of craft we're dealing with here. The show isn't just hiding messages, it's hiding hospitality. But the theme song doesn't stop there. The visuals are doing the same work the audio is. The 30-second sequence is a montage of Polaroid photographs flashing past, and almost every single one of them is foreshadowing. The Polaroids feature all the villains the twins will meet over the course of the show. The Hand Witch, the Gnomes, the Summerween Monster, Gideon, and once again the Time Traveler Blendin Blandin in the background. You watch the theme on first viewing and see colorful chaos. You watch the theme after a full rewatch and you see a guest list for the entire season. Every monster you're going to fight. Every antagonist you're going to outsmart. They've been smiling at you from the photo album since day one. And then there's the figure in the trees, the hairy shape that flashes by for a single frame during the forest part of the theme song. Casual viewers thought it was Bigfoot. It is in fact Bigfoot, who appears in the woods for a split second in the opening credits. Fine. But Bigfoot isn't a punchline. Bigfoot is a real creature in this universe. The forest the twins live next to genuinely contains Sasquatches and gnomes and shapeshifters and ancient dimensional rifts, and the theme song is showing you that on purpose, in a half-second flash, before the show has even told you the rules of its own world. The trees in this opening are not decoration. They are a creature documentary disguised as flora. Then the page of the journal flips into frame. The page shows a triangle with one eye wearing a top hat. Most kids didn't blink at it the first time. By the Season 2 midpoint, they were calling that triangle by name and dreading every appearance. Towards the end of the theme song, there's an image of Bill Cipher, the show's main antagonist, who doesn't make his first proper appearance in the actual episodes until the Season 1 episode, Dreamscaperers. So before you've ever heard the name Bill Cipher in dialogue, the show has shown you his face every single episode. He's been hiding in your living room since the pilot. The show didn't introduce the villain in the season finale. The show introduced the villain on the front porch and waited to see when you'd notice him. That's the trick of the theme song, and that's the trick of the whole series. Every single thing you missed the first time was meant to be missed the first time. The second time, the third time, the rewatch you do after the finale lands, that's where the show actually lives. It's a piece of television designed to be watched at least twice, and the second watch is when the real plot starts. That brings us to the structure of the show itself. Because once you understand that every frame of the opening was foreshadowing, you can't watch the first episode the same way again. The Mystery Shack isn't a tourist trap, it's a stage, and the man running the cash register is rehearsing a 30-episode magic trick. Episode 1 was already the whole series. The first episode of Gravity Falls is called Tourist Trapped. It introduces Dipper and Mabel, drops them off at a creaky shack in the woods, and lets them tangle with a band of gnomes who try to marry Mabel as their queen. On the surface, it's a Sugar Rush opener about siblings learning to look out for each other in a weird new town. Underneath, it's a 35-page contract being signed by the audience without their knowledge. Every recurring element in the show, every Easter egg system, every visual rule the writers will use to plant clues for the next 2 seasons gets introduced in those 22 minutes. The first episode isn't really an episode. It's a tutorial. Start with the Mystery Shack itself. Stan walks the twins through the gift shop and you see a rug on the floor. The rug has a triangular pattern with an eye in the middle surrounded by symbols. Kids on first viewing assume it's a tacky decorative choice, the sort of thing a cheap tourist trap would slap on the ground to feel mystical. And the triangle eye on the floor is the literal sigil used to summon the demon, who will eventually try to destroy reality. The Pines family is walking across their future villain's face every single day of the summer. The dust they're tracking in is settling on the most dangerous symbol in the universe. And no one says a word about it because to them it's just a rug. Then there's the window. If you watch the attic scenes carefully, the upper window of the Mystery Shack is shaped to resemble a triangle with an eye. The villain isn't just on the floor, he's the architecture. The house itself is a summoning circle. And Stan, the supposed con man running the place, built it that way on purpose decades ago, because he knew exactly what was buried in the basement. You don't learn that until much later, but it's there in episode 1, in every wide shot of the building. Bill is looking through the window at the twins from the moment they arrive. The triangle iconography goes everywhere. It's on Stan's necklace tie, it's on signs, it's on backgrounds in the gift shop. There are paintings around the Mystery Shack that hide Bill's eye, including a moment in Dreamscaperers, where a frame shows a flash of Bill's eye in the background during a dream sequence, a foreshadowing technique the show used repeatedly. Once you know to look for the triangle, you can't unsee it. The wallpaper in the kitchen, The show is haunted by its own future, and it shows you the ghost before you know it's a ghost. Then there's the number. Watch the show long enough, and you'll see the digits 6, 1, and 8 everywhere. License plates, clock readings, page numbers in the journal, bus seat numbers, house addresses, receipts in the background of the gift shop. It looks like coincidence until you find out the trick. The number 618, a reference to June 18th, Alex and Ariel Hirsch's birthday, is placed throughout the show. It's a love letter from the creator to his twin sister, written in the wallpaper of his own show. The siblings on screen are his and her childhood. The siblings in the writing room are him and the family he's still close to. The number is his way of signing the painting every few frames so that any rewatch becomes an act of intimacy. He's there in the corner waving. He's been there the whole time. That extends to the characters themselves. Stan's design hides a tattoo on his shoulder that Mabel walks past in the dressing room scene during Dreamscaperers. In one scene, Grunkle Stan is shown with a tattoo on his shoulder, which is the same as the glowing red symbol that refers back to the interdimensional portal hidden in the basement. The man you think is a huckster has a brand on his body that links him to a piece of weaponized physics, buried under his living room. The tattoo isn't a decoration, it's a receipt. He bought into this story long before the kids arrived, and the body remembers what the mouth refuses to say. And then there's Seuss, big, sweet, slightly clueless Seuss. Handyman wears a green shirt, says dude a lot. You assume he's comic relief, and you'd be partially right. Seuss represents the question mark on the Bill Cipher zodiac. The same as Dipper represents the pine tree on his hat, Mabel represents the shooting star on her sweater, and Ford represents the six-fingered hand from his journal cover. The clothes the main cast wears throughout the entire show are not random costume choices. They are zodiac positions. They are pieces on a board that will be put in place during the apocalypse. Seuss has a question mark not because he's confused, but because the universe needs him to stand on a specific patch of dirt in the series finale and be the question mark, while 10 other people stand on their own marked patches and form the only weapon that can defeat the demon who's been hiding in the rug since episode 1. That's what we mean when we say the first episode is a tutorial. The clothes you see are the moves. The rug you see is the board. The window you see is the eye of the player on the other side. And Stan's tattoo is the bookmark for everything that came before the twins arrive. The background cameos that span 2 seasons. Now consider Blendin Blandin. Blendin is a time traveler from the future. He wears a green camouflage suit that lets him blend into backgrounds, and he runs a one-man crusade against the Pines twins for ruining his career. He's introduced as a recurring antagonist in Season 1's The Time Traveler's Pig, which is the 8th episode of the entire series. So you'd assume his story starts there. It doesn't. Blendin Blandin is in the background of the first 3 episodes of the entire series. Blending into the green wallpaper, the ferns outside the shack, the foliage in the woods, watching the twins from a distance before the show ever bothers to introduce him. He was always there. The audience didn't see him because the audience wasn't supposed to see him yet. The show planted him in the wallpaper of episodes 1 through 3 because he was watching the twins from the future and then casually delivered a Star Wars grade payoff 6 episodes later when he finally walked out of the wall. That kind of patience is almost reckless. Most animated shows wouldn't bother hiding a future antagonist in the texture of episode 1 because they have no idea if there'll be an episode 8. Hirsch's team knew the whole map before they drew a single frame. They knew Blendin would matter. They knew the rug would matter. They knew the carpet pattern, the window shape, the tattoo, the number, the Polaroid photographs, the whispers in the theme song, the cipher key, the journal symbol. All of it would mature into something 30 episodes later, and they planted it in the soil of episode 1 anyway, knowing the harvest was years away. If you want one more example of this, look at Lil Gideon. Gideon is the show's first proper villain arc, the child psychic, who tries to take over the Mystery Shack across Season 1. He doesn't appear as a real character until The Hand That Rocks the Mabel, the 4th episode. But fans who rewatched the early episodes after Gideon became a household name found him in the background of episode 2. Lil Gideon is on the back of a magazine Dipper is reading in The Legend of the Gobblewonker. 2 episodes before he's introduced as a character, he's an advertisement on a glossy back cover that Dipper flips past while wasting time on a fishing trip. He's already famous in this universe. The show isn't introducing him. The show is letting you catch up to a celebrity that's been on the newsstands the whole summer. That logic powers the show's entire visual language. Nothing arrives. Everything is already there. The villain is in the rug. The clothing is a prophecy. The number is a love letter. The tattoo is a confession. The window is a face. The wallpaper is an enemy. The magazine is a casting call. And the journal Dipper finds in the woods at the end of episode 1 is the manual that lets you read all of it. The 3 journals and the man who wrote them. In the closing minutes of Tourist Trapped, Dipper trips into a strange machine in the forest and pulls a book out of the hollow at the base of a tree. The book is bound in red leather. It has a 6-fingered golden hand on the cover, and inside the hand is the number 3. Dipper assumes someone hid the book there on purpose. He's right. He just doesn't know how long ago, or by whom, or how many other journals exist out in the world waiting to be found. The journal becomes the show's spine. Dipper carries it everywhere. He references it when he encounters a new creature. He reads its warnings out loud when the action slows down. It looks at first like a clever way for the writers to deliver exposition, a magical book that conveniently has the answers to whatever monster the twins meet that week. But the journal isn't a plot device. It's a diary. Somebody real wrote it? Somebody with a 6-fingered hand? Somebody who saw all of this before Dipper did, and somebody whose identity is the second largest mystery in the show after Stan's. The journal Dipper finds is Journal 3, the third and last in a series of 3 journals written by a researcher who would not be named or shown until season 2. And across the whole show, Dipper, Mabel, and Stan are independently searching for the other 2 journals, because the trio of books contains the instructions for activating a hidden machine in the basement of the Mystery Shack. 3 books? 3 brothers, in a way? One in Dipper's hands, one in Gideon's hands, one under Stan's mattress. The audience doesn't learn all of this for a long time, but it's there from minute 18 of episode 1. The map of the entire series is folded into the journal. Dipper opens at the end of his first day in town, and the man who wrote it, the 6-fingered author, he has a face on the back of Journal 3, a hand with 6 digits, the same number of digits as a man we haven't met yet, but whose name has already been whispered by a backwards voice in the theme song. The man behind the curtain in this story isn't behind a curtain, he's behind a portal in the basement. And he's been on the other side of that portal for 30 years already by the time the twins arrive. You'll meet him in Chunk 5. By then, the entire world of Gravity Falls will start folding inward on itself like origami. And you'll see that what looked like a series of Monster of the Week episodes was actually a long, deliberate march toward the moment a 6-fingered hand emerges from a glowing portal under a tourist trap and punches its own brother in the face. But before we get there, we need to talk about the wheel, because the rug isn't just a rug. The shape on the floor of the Mystery Shack is a prophecy, carved by a civilization that existed in this valley thousands of years before the Pines family arrived. And every character on the show is a piece of that prophecy, whether they know it or not. If you froze the theme song on the right frame back in 2012, you would have seen a circle on an old parchment page. Inside the circle, 10 symbols arranged like the face of a clock. A pine tree, a shooting star, a pair of glasses, a 6-fingered hand, a llama, a fish, a bag of ice, a pentagram, a stitched heart, a question mark, and in the center of the circle, the triangle with one eye, sitting like a spider in the middle of its own web. Most viewers in Season 1 assumed this was decoration, the kind of mystical-looking diagram you'd expect on the front of a book about ghost hunting, designed to make the show feel occult and old. Fans on Reddit and Tumblr knew better almost immediately. They started cross-referencing the symbols against the clothes the characters wore, and the pattern showed up so fast it stopped being funny. Dipper wore a pine tree on his hat. Mabel wore a shooting star on her sweater. Suze had a question mark on his shirt. Stan wore a fez with a moon and fish pattern. Wendy carried an ice pack to her shifts at the shack. Gideon wore a star pentagram on his cape. Pacifica was associated with a llama, partly because her family kept exotic animals, and partly because her snobbish behavior matched the symbol's vibe. Robbie, the moody teen guitarist who dated Wendy, had a stitched heart on his sweatshirt. Old Man McGucket had broken glasses balanced on his nose, and the journal Dipper found had a six-fingered hand on its cover. That's 10 characters, all of them already wearing their zodiac sign in episode 1. The wheel was a cast list hidden in plain sight, before half the characters had even spoken a line of dialogue. The cipher wheel scene in the opening credits led fans to believe that 10 specific characters would have to join hands to defeat Bill, and the theory correctly identified the symbols: the pine tree representing Dipper, the shooting star representing Mabel, the question mark representing Seuss, the ice bag representing Wendy, the fez symbol representing Stan, the six-fingered hand representing Ford, the llama representing Pacifica, the stitched heart representing Robbie, the glasses representing Fiddleford McGucket, and the pentagram representing Gideon. Fans called this out years before the show confirmed it. The writers had hidden the entire defeat condition of the final boss inside the wardrobe department of Season 1. That's an extraordinary piece of design. The wheel works on 2 levels at once. On the surface, it looks like classic Saturday morning mysticism. Old symbols on a parchment page, the kind of thing you'd put on a poster for a cartoon about kids in a haunted town. But mechanically, it's a Chekhov's gun the size of an entire cast. Every clothing decision, every prop, every character introduction is also a placement on the board. When the show finally reveals what the wheel means, 2 seasons later, the audience doesn't need to be told who goes where. They've been dressed in their assignments since the first frame. Ford explains the wheel during Weirdmageddon 3, Take Back the Falls, the second half of the finale. Ford reveals that he discovered these symbols passed down from the natives of Gravity Falls, ancient inhabitants who carved the zodiac into cave paintings as a warning and a weapon thousands of years before the events of the show. The wheel isn't a Pines invention. It isn't even a McGucket invention. It's something a pre-colonial civilization scratched onto a cave wall as an instruction manual. For the next time a triangle-shaped god tried to crawl out of the sky, Ford spent 3 decades cross-referencing those cave paintings, decoding what they meant, identifying which living people in Gravity Falls happened to match the 10 symbols, and writing it all into his journal. The cave was a war room. The journal was a battle plan. The kids were the soldiers, and they didn't know they had been recruited. And here's the catch the writers planted in the finale that recontextualizes the entire show. The Zodiac prophecy fails to come to pass after Stan and Ford break the circle, when their unresolved fight over a grammatical correction shatters the ritual at the critical moment and the wheel never activates. The prophecy doesn't work. The 10 characters get arranged, they hold hands, they form the circle the cave paintings predicted, and then Stan flinches because Ford corrected his grammar and the magic falls apart. The ancient civilization that buried this weapon for thousands of years built a tool that depended on 2 brothers being able to get along for 10 seconds. And the brothers couldn't even manage that. This is a genuinely audacious storytelling move. The show spent 2 seasons hiding a prophecy in the wardrobe, training fans to crack it, building anticipation for the moment the 10 symbols would gather, and then refused to let the prophecy work. The wheel is a beautiful, intricate, satisfying piece of foreshadowing that resolves into a punchline about how human beings, even the ones in the middle of saving the universe, can't get out of their own way. The genius isn't just the setup, it's the deliberate refusal to give the audience the easy payoff. Bill doesn't get defeated by destiny. He gets defeated by something else, something the show has been quietly arguing for from episode 1, and we'll come back to what that something is later. Here's where the show's craft starts feeling almost unfair. The Zodiac Wheel isn't the only foreshadowing system running in the background. It's nested inside another one. The cipher messages at the end of every episode form their own running prophecy, and a lot of them point directly at events that won't happen for half a season or more. Take the cryptogram at the end of Gideon Rises, the Season 1 finale. The episode is about Gideon's defeat. The child psychic is stripped of his journal, exposed as a fraud, and arrested. The episode ends with what looks like a clean win. Then the credits roll, and a cryptogram appears at the bottom of the screen. Decoded, it says, "Search for the blind eye." The credits cryptogram at the end of Gideon Rises refers to the secret society that won't be properly introduced until Society of the Blind Eye in Season 2. And the show's writers used the cryptogram to point fans toward a real fan website at the URL searchfortheblindeye.com. that contained additional puzzles to solve during the show's hiatus. The show didn't just hide a teaser in the credits. It linked the credits to an external website that fans had to solve during the gap between seasons. The cryptogram was an advertisement for a metagame running outside the show, and the answers in that metagame fed back into the lore of the show itself. You have to sit with that for a second. A children's cartoon on Disney XD treated its end credits as alternate reality game infrastructure. Fans were solving real puzzles on real domains in the months between seasons. Finding scraps of in-universe text that fleshed out the world Hirsch was building. The cipher at the end of the episode wasn't ending the story. It was inviting you outside the screen to keep playing. The end credits cryptograms also doubled as comedic asides for fans who'd cracked them. The ending cryptogram in Boys Crazy decoded to Happy Now, Ariel, which was Hirsch's reference to his own twin sister and her childhood obsession with the boy band NSYNC, an obsession that inspired the episode's storyline about the fictional band Several Times. The cipher at the end of an episode about a teen girl losing her mind over a boy band is a love note from Alex to his sister Ariel saying, "I made this for you. Are you happy?" The man who created Gravity Falls used the end credits cipher of an episode aired to millions of households as a private message to one specific person. And he hid it so casually that you'd only ever find it if you sat down with a pencil and translated 30 letters by hand. The cryptograms also operated as a kind of running commentary. The end of Not What He Seems, the episode that finally reveals Stan's identity is fake, displays the cipher, the original mystery twins, underneath a shot of a young Stanley and Stanford Pines together as kids. The cryptogram is positioned underneath a shot of the younger Stanley and Stanford Pines and says the original mystery twins, reframing Dipper and Mabel's adventures as a generational echo of an earlier pair of brothers who had the exact same dynamic decades before. The pun is also a thesis. The show is telling you that what you're watching in the present is a replay of what happened in the past, that Dipper is walking in the footsteps of someone who walked this same road 30 years ago, and that whatever broke between the older twins is the same thing the show is going to test in the younger ones. The cryptogram is a literary device dressed up as a Caesar cipher. The system that creates all this is so deep that even Alex Hirsch sometimes used the cryptograms to lie to fans. Between seasons 1 and 2, when fans had narrowed the identity of the journal's author down to a few suspects, Hirsch posted a fake storyboard image online that appeared to show a younger McGucket writing in a journal. Old Man McGucket was speculated to be the author due to a leaked image of a younger him writing the journal. However, the episode Society of the Blind Eye disproved this theory, and it was later revealed that the leaked image was actually a fake created by Alex Hirsch to fool the viewers. The creator of the show personally manufactured a fake leak to throw the audience off the scent of his own twist. He didn't just hide secrets in the show, he hid secrets outside the show. He treated the fandom like a chess opponent and made deliberate decoy moves to keep them from solving the puzzle a season early. This is what we mean when we say the show is genius. Not just that it had good writing. Lots of cartoons have good writing. Gravity Falls operated as a multi-layered cryptography project that spanned the screen, the credits, the merchandise, the websites, and even the creator's social media accounts. The show was a puzzle box, and the puzzle box was bigger than the show. But to understand why the show went this hard, you have to understand the demon at the center of the wheel. Bill Cipher isn't just a villain. He's the philosophical engine of the whole project, and his backstory, when you finally get it, is so dark that it explains everything from the cave paintings to the rug to the broken prophecy in the finale. Bill Cipher is a one-eyed triangle in a top hat who speaks in a high-pitched voice, makes terrible jokes, and occasionally rips out his own eye to use as a doorbell. On first viewing, he reads as a joke villain, too goofy to take seriously, too cartoonish to actually scare anybody. Then Sock Opera airs in Season 2, and he possesses a child's body to torture his own host for fun. And you realize the goofiness was the costume. The thing underneath is older than the show wants to say. The writers had to keep Bill funny because Bill was on Disney. A Disney villain can be threatening but can only commit certain kinds of violence on screen. So the writers offloaded Bill's real menace into the bones of the world. Cave paintings older than the United States. Cipher wheels carved by people who didn't even speak the same language as the present-day cast. a prophecy waiting for thousands of years for a specific set of 10 people to gather and stop him. The town of Gravity Falls itself, sitting on top of an interdimensional crack in reality that the indigenous inhabitants knew about long before any white settler ever heard the word Oregon. Bill is the reason all of this exists. He isn't a Saturday morning villain who showed up in Season 2. He's a 1 trillion-year-old genocide who came to Earth because his last home didn't survive the last time he had this much fun. That's not hyperbole. That's the actual canon. And we'll lay it out in the next chunk. Because Bill Cipher didn't start in Gravity Falls. He didn't start in the Nightmare Realm. He started in a place called Euclidia. And what he did there is the reason a cave painting exists in Oregon. The trillion-year-old genocide, here's where Gravity Falls stops being a kid's show. It was never really a kid's show, but here is where the writer's room let you see the spine of the thing they were actually making. Bill Cipher's origin doesn't appear anywhere in the 40 episodes that aired on Disney. You won't find it in any episode summary. It exists in the supplementary materials, Journal 3, the in-universe canonical book Hirsch wrote after the show ended, and the Book of Bill, the 2024 follow-up that Hirsch published in Bill's own voice, but it explains everything the show could only hint at on screen. Euclidia, also called the Second Dimension, is the name of Bill Cipher's origin dimension, inhabited by beings known as Euclideans, and was destroyed almost exactly 1 trillion years ago. Through unknown means by Bill, read that sentence twice, 1 trillion years. Not a million, not a billion, a trillion. The universe itself is only about 13 billion years old. The number is so big it stops meaning anything. Bill predates physics. He predates the rules of cause and effect that everything else in the show relies on. He has been running this con for so long that the cosmos, as we understand it, is a recent development by his calendar. Euclidia was a flat universe, a two-dimensional plane populated by two-dimensional shapes, all of them living inside the same paper. The dimension is said to be a two-dimensional realm, one that three-dimensional minds couldn't process, and its inhabitants take the form of sentient two-dimensional shapes that bump around endlessly within, their line of scope limited to a flat line of sight. The Euclideans couldn't perceive depth, they couldn't even imagine it. Up and down were not words that meant anything to them. They lived their entire lives inside an infinite piece of paper, and the only directions that existed were left, right, forward, and back. Bill was born into this paper world, and he was born wrong. He had a defect. Something in his geometry let him look upward in a way the other shapes couldn't. He could see the third dimension. He could perceive depth that nobody else around him could perceive. And from his earliest moments, he understood that there was more to existence than the flat plane his neighbors were trapped in. Bill claimed that he was beloved by everyone in his home dimension, but it is implied that Bill's claims were false, as Bill despised living there, ostracized for his mutation, giving him the drive to finally make his race understand what he saw. The villain of Gravity Falls started his career as a bullied kid with a weird eye, who couldn't get anyone to believe him about what he saw. That's not a sympathetic backstory. It's a recognizable one. Hirsch and his team designed the villain so that the worst thing in the universe started as the kind of kid you might know. What Bill did next is the event the show is built around without ever quite naming. In an event known as the Euclidean Massacre, Bill liberated his dimension by plunging it into burning chaos, along with everyone he had ever known, including his own parents. And possibly due to the inherent trauma of the event, he is unable to fully recount the details of the massacre, with a loud, buzzing noise beginning in his ears whenever he tries to remember. Bill says he set out to show his neighbors the third dimension, to prove the thing he'd been seeing in his head, to force the flat people to look up. And in the attempt, something went catastrophically wrong, and every single inhabitant of his home universe died, every shape he had ever known. His parents, his childhood, the whole paper world burned, and Bill was the only thing left standing. Based on Bill's recount, although incomplete, he could hear screams getting louder and louder, as blood was everywhere, and his hands began shaking as he realized he could not undo what had happened. And after the last one of his dimension took a breath, Bill was left covered in blood and alone in the universe. He blacks out every time he tries to write the memory down. Hirsch wrote The Demon as a creature who survived his own atrocity and built a personality around not feeling it. The high voice, the bad jokes, the love of chaos, the Carnival Barker showmanship, it's all camouflage. Bill is funny the way someone is funny when the alternative is screaming. He spent 1 trillion years figuring out how to live with what he did, and the system he came up with was to do it again, somewhere else, on someone else, for sport. After Euclidia burned, Bill drifted. He eventually took over a boiling and shifting intergalactic foam between dimensions, a lawless and unstable crawl space known as the Nightmare Realm, where he could exist as a non-corporeal entity influencing the minds of other beings through their dreams. He became a king of nothing. The Nightmare Realm is the show's name for the space between universes, an unstable membrane where the physics of the third dimension hasn't yet locked in. Bill ruled it because nobody else wanted to, and from that perch, he started reaching into other dimensions through dreams, looking for the next paper world he could set on fire. Why he came to Oregon, a creature this old, doesn't just stumble into a small town in Oregon, he chooses it. The reason Gravity Falls exists as a location of supernatural concentration is because Bill made it that way over thousands of years. Bill came to learn of a prophecy that stated he could bring his chaos into the alternate universe, and Bill manipulated countless humans over the eons to find a way into the third dimension as a physical being to liberate that dimension as well, with his targets including natives who lived in what would become a town called Gravity Falls, Oregon. He'd been pitching this idea to people for generations, he whispered to shamans, he showed up in the dreams of medicine men. He picked Oregon because the land there was thin, in some metaphysical way, weak between the dimensions, easier to crack open than other places. He worked the territory for centuries before any settler ever heard the name Gravity Falls. The local people figured him out. The people discovered that Bill was too dangerous and found a way to temporarily defeat him using a zodiac with 10 symbols, and they left behind a painting of their encounter with the demon, including how to summon him, and more importantly, a warning never to read it. The cave painting is older than the United States. It contains the summoning ritual, and it contains the warning that summoning him is the worst mistake any human being can make. The wheel we talked about in the previous chunk, the one carved by people who lived in this valley long before the Pines family, was made by the only humans who had ever beaten Bill Cipher and lived to leave instructions for the next time. Those instructions sat in a cave for centuries. They sat there during the colonial period. They sat there during the founding of Oregon as a state. They sat there while loggers built the town, while tourists drove through, while Stan Pines opened a fake mystery hut to scam them out of their money. And they sat there until a young researcher named Stanford Pines arrived in Gravity Falls in the 1970s, found the painting, and made the worst decision in the history of his family. We'll get to him in a moment. But first, the philosophical point. Bill Cipher is not a creature of evil, he's a creature of chaos. There's a difference, and the show is precise about it. Evil wants something, chaos doesn't. Bill desires to bring chaos across the rest of known existence by achieving a physical form and opening a rift between the Nightmare Realm and Earth, converting it into an endless, never-ending party for his very own personal amusement, where he rules supreme across the multiverse. The endgame isn't world conquest in the usual sense. He doesn't want resources or power for its own sake. He wants a party. He wants reality to behave the way Euclidia behaved in his final moments. Screaming and burning and laughing at the same time, he wants the third dimension, to feel what the second dimension felt when he was done with it. And he wants to be there to watch it, with a drink in his hand, because something inside him broke 1 trillion years ago, and the only thing that fills the silence is the sound of another universe coming apart. This is a heavy concept for a show that also features a character named Seuss eating an entire pizza in one bite, and yet the show carries the weight. The reason Bill is funny is because the writers understood that a creature that old, that lonely, that traumatized would have to find a way to make himself laugh, or he would not be able to keep moving. The jokes aren't covering for weak writing. The jokes are character work. They are the sound of a survivor who never processed what he survived. Bill is also seen in Easter eggs in other cartoons, which is canon, and he could have jumped into other universes, even ours, after his defeat, the show flirts with the idea that Bill isn't even contained by the medium of the show itself. The final episode includes the suggestion that he found a way out before the Pines family finished the job, and his image has appeared in other animated series since, sometimes as a deliberate crossover, and sometimes as a wink. The triangle didn't stay in Gravity Falls. He traveled. He's been spotted in Rick and Morty. He has merchandise. He has a real-world fan base of people who still get into arguments online about whether his name should be capitalized. When it appears in cryptograms, the villain escaped the show, and in the canon of the supplementary material, Bill ends up somewhere worse than dead because of his final words spoken backwards in the finale. Bill is sent to a tank outside of space where a deity known as the Axolotl resides, a higher being who oversees the boundaries between dimensions. He's not destroyed. He's imprisoned in a kind of cosmic asylum, watched over by a god who is older than he is, awaiting some form of judgment or rehabilitation. The book Hirsch published in 2024 spends much of its length describing Bill's stay in this prison, and the implication is that the demon is finally being forced after 1 trillion years to actually sit with what he did. The door he came through now, with all of that backstory in place, look back at the Mystery Shack. The rug on the floor of the gift shop is the same triangular sigil that Bill uses to manifest in dreams. The window in the attic is shaped like his eye. The summoning instructions for him are on a cave painting that predates the town and buried in the basement of the Mystery Shack. Underneath the rug, underneath the gift shop, is a machine, a portal, a door that connects this world to the Nightmare Realm. That portal is not an accident. It was built by a man with 6 fingers who arrived in Gravity Falls in the late 1970s with a PhD in a backpack and a dream of being a great scientist. A man whose backstory will reframe the entire show when you finally hear it. A man whose own brother spent 30 years trying to bring him home. A man named Ford. And what happened to Ford in this town, and how Bill manipulated him into building the door, is the second largest secret in the series. We've spent 4 chunks talking about the foreshadowing. The wheel, the rug, the cave painting, the trillion-year-old origin. Now we have to talk about the brothers, because the rug and the window and the cipher and the wheel and the cave painting and the Euclidean massacre and the Nightmare Realm and Bill Cipher himself all converge in one moment. Late in Season 2, when a hooded figure with 6 fingers walks out of a glowing portal in the basement of the Mystery Shack and punches his own twin brother in the face. And the show had been telling you that Punch was coming in Cipher since episode 1. Most TV writers will tell you a season-long mystery is hard. You have to plant the clues early enough that the payoff feels earned, but not so obviously that the audience solves it before you do. You have to keep the central question alive across 12 or 13 episodes, without letting the answer leak. Gravity Falls played a harder game, the central twist of the entire series. The answer to who Grunkle Stan really is sits unrevealed for 30 episodes. 30 across 2 seasons. And the show didn't just hide the answer, it hid the question. Most of the audience didn't even realize there was a mystery about Stan's identity until the moment the mystery resolved. The episode that drops the bomb is Not What He Seems, and the title is the punchline to a joke the show had been telling since the first episode aired. Remember the cryptogram from the end of Tourist Trapped? The one that decoded to Stan is not what he seems. That was the show announcing its biggest twist on day 1, in code, knowing that nobody could read the code yet, and trusting that the fans, who eventually learned to read it, would freeze when they got to the answer. The title of the reveal episode is the literal solved cryptogram from the first episode of the series. The whole show is a 30-episode-long Caesar cipher with a payoff sitting in plain sight. The episode Not What He Seems was first broadcast on March 9, 2015 on Disney XD, and breaks the show's status quo by introducing Stan's long-lost twin brother, ending with a cliffhanger to the second half of the season. The plot of the episode is deceptively simple. Stan has been collecting barrels of radioactive waste for reasons he refuses to explain. Government agents show up at the door. The twins find a newspaper clipping that says Stan Pines is dead, with a photo of an older version of their great-uncle's face. They confront him in the basement. There's a machine, a portal, a timer counting down. Stan is begging them to trust him. Mabel is holding the lever that will shut the portal down. Dipper is screaming at her to pull it. The agents are pounding on the door upstairs. And Stan, the con man, the cheapskate, the comic relief uncle the kids have spent 2 seasons mocking, has tears in his eyes and is telling Mabel that everything he is doing is for their family. Before telling Mabel that everything he was doing was for their family, Stan was to have said in an earlier script draft, "I wanted to say that until you twins showed up this summer, I didn't know if my stupid life was worth living." The line got cut, but the emotional intent stayed. Stan is opening the portal because for 30 years he has been alone in this house, working in a basement nobody knows about, trying to bring back the only person who ever understood him. Before the niece and nephew gave him a reason to keep going, Mabel sees that on his face. She lets the timer run, the portal opens, the light fills the room, and out of the glowing rectangle walks a hooded figure with a 6-fingered hand. The figure pulls back the hood. He looks exactly like Stan except for the glasses and the beard. And Stan, smiling for the first time in the episode, says, "It can't be." The reveal works on 3 levels at once. On the plot level, the journal author, Dipper has been chasing for 2 seasons, finally has a face, and the face is Stan's long-lost twin brother. On the character level, the man the audience thought was a huckster is suddenly a hero who sacrificed his identity, his name, his entire adult life to bring his brother home. And on the foreshadowing level, every single moment of cryptic strangeness in the previous 2 seasons retroactively snaps into focus: the cryptograms, the tattoo, the basement, the radioactive waste, the window, the rug. The way Stan flinched whenever anyone asked about his past. The way he stared at the portrait of himself as a teenager in the family photos. All of it. The lie wasn't a lie, it was a 30-year impersonation by a brother who refused to give up. The episode after the reveal is called A Tale of Two Stans. It's a flashback episode. It explains how 2 brothers who used to share everything ended up separated by a dimensional portal for 3 decades. And it's 22 minutes of some of the most emotionally precise writing ever done on Disney TV. The episode continues immediately where Not What He Seems left off, following Ford's emergence from the portal, with the author of the journals finally being introduced and revealed to be Stan's long-lost twin brother, leading to an explanation of Grunkle Stan's backstory and who he really is and was. The cold open shows 2 kids on a beach in New Jersey. They're identical. One of them has 6 fingers on each hand. They're building a boat together. They've named it the Stan O War, and they plan to sail around the world, looking for treasure when they grow up. Both of them are wearing the same Fez-style hat. The episode tells you, without saying it out loud, that whatever broke between them is going to hurt. In Glass Shard Beach, New Jersey, and from an early age was fascinated with the supernatural and science fiction displaying an abnormally high IQ and a rare birth defect that granted him an extra finger on both hands. The polydactyly is genetic but rare. It marks him from birth. It's also the reason the journal has a 6-fingered hand on its cover. Ford signed every book he wrote with a print of his own hand because the hand was his identity in a way the name wasn't. He grew up being teased for it. Other kids called him a freak. The only person who never made him feel like a freak was his brother Stanley. The brothers were a team. Ford was the brain. Stan was the muscle and the personality. Ford was going to be a great scientist. Stan was going to be his manager, his protector, his fellow adventurer on the Stan O War. And then, the day before college applications were due, Stan accidentally broke Ford's science fair project, a perpetual motion machine that was supposed to win Ford a scholarship to West Coast Tech, the most prestigious university in the country. The accident was small, a nudge with an elbow. He had to settle for a smaller school. And his father, Philbrick Pines, Stan spent the next 10 years homeless, selling cleaning products door to door, getting beaten up by loan sharks, sleeping in his car, trying to earn enough money to make it up to his brother, who refused to take his calls. Ford spent those same 10 years building a career as a paranormal researcher and ended up in a place called Gravity Falls, Oregon, where he found the most dimensionally unstable spot on the planet and started writing journals about what lived in the woods. He was lonely. He was brilliant. He was vulnerable to a voice in his head that promised to make him the greatest scientist who ever lived, and the voice was Bill Cipher. Stanford reveals that he was tricked into a deal with Bill when he built the portal, only to learn that Cipher wanted to use it to take over Earth by merging it with his nightmare realm. Bill, who had been waiting in the woods for centuries, found a brilliant, lonely scientist with 6 fingers on each hand and offered him friendship, knowledge, and the chance to build something that would change the world. Ford signed up. He let Bill into his dreams. He let Bill guide the construction of the portal. He thought he was building a doorway to scientific discovery. He was building a doorway to the end of the world. And by the time he figured out what was happening, it was too late to stop. So he wrote 3 journals describing everything he had learned and hid them in different parts of the forest, then called the only person on Earth he trusted with the truth. He called Stan. Stan flew to Gravity Falls. He hadn't seen his brother in 10 years. He arrived expecting an apology, a hug, a chance to fix things. Ford handed him a journal and told him to hide it on the other side of the country and never read it. That was the deal. Take the book, leave the brother, never come back. Stan flipped, they argued, and the shove sent Ford backwards into his own activated portal. A bitter Stanley punched Stanford through the portal, which broke soon after. And plagued by guilt, Stanley spent the next 30 years attempting to reactivate the portal, which he only accomplished recently after finding the other 2 journals. And to make ends meet and develop a cover story, Stanley assumed Stanford's identity and faked his own death, turning his brother's old house into a tourist attraction, the Mystery Shack. The Mystery Shack was a cover. The tourist trap was a 30-year masquerade. Stan was hiding in plain sight, using his dead brother's identity, scamming tourists to pay the electric bill on a portal he didn't know how to operate, waiting for the other 2 journals to surface so he could finish his brother's machine and bring him home. That's why the show called him a huckster. Because that's what he had to look like. A small-time con artist running a sad tourist trap in the woods is invisible to the government. A brilliant inventor secretly trying to rebuild an interdimensional portal is not. The con was the camouflage. For 30 years, he ran this play. He slept in his brother's bed. He wore his brother's clothes. He took his brother's name. He let everyone in town call him Stanford. He had no idea where his actual brother was. He didn't know if the portal would even work. He didn't know if Ford would come back alive or as something else. He didn't know if turning the machine on would kill him or save him. And he did it anyway, alone, in a basement, every night, for 3 decades, because the last words he ever said to his brother were said in anger. And he couldn't live with that being the ending. The reveal lands in A Tale of Two Stans with the brothers in their 60s, in the basement of the Mystery Shack with 2 13-year-old kids, and a handyman watching them try to have a conversation for the first time since 1982. The author is furious that Stan used the portal, citing the destruction it could cause. And Stan is in turn upset that he's not being thanked for saving his brother, to which the author brings up a past incident 30 years prior, and the fighting is interrupted by Mabel, who speaks on behalf of herself. Dipper and Seuss asking what the heck is going on. Mabel's line is the audience's line. Because we have just been told that the show we thought we were watching is actually a different show. The Mystery Shack is not a Mystery Shack. The owner of the Mystery Shack is not the owner. The author of the journals is here in the basement punching the man we thought wrote the journals. And the kids who came to Oregon for a summer vacation are now the only living grandchildren of a family that has been torn apart by an interdimensional Cold War for longer than they've been alive. Dipper is so excited to finally meet the author that he nearly throws up, and Stan introduces the kids as the grandchildren of their brother, Shermie, while the author greets the children and asks Stan if anyone else knows about the portal, the branch of the family tree that has been so utterly normal that it produced two 13-year-old kids who got dropped off at a tourist trap one summer. The weird genetics of the Pines line skipped a generation and came back in Dipper and Mabel, and the show implies, without ever saying it out loud, that the younger twins might be a second chance for the older ones, a do-over, a version of Stanley and Stanford that gets to finish the Stan-O War. That's what Mabel realizes at the end of the episode, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to her great-uncles argue downstairs. Mabel staring up at the ceiling in the final scene is enough to imply peace won't stay for long, even if it's just emotional peace. With Mabel worrying that she and Dipper will end up like Stan and Ford when they're older, the episode ends with Mabel terrified that her own twin bond might break the same way the older one did. That fear is the engine of the rest of the show. The remaining 8 episodes of the series are not really about defeating Bill Cipher. They are about whether Dipper and Mabel can avoid becoming Ford and Stan. And the genius is that the show was setting this up from the cold open of episode 1. The shot of 2 kids on a porch in Oregon with a tourist trap behind them was always meant to rhyme with 2 kids on a beach in New Jersey with a boat in front of them. The summer was a rerun. The question was whether the rerun could end better than the original. Before we get to how the show handles the question of whether the younger twins can avoid the older twins' mistake, we have to talk about the third Pines collaborator, the man who built the portal with Ford, the man who saw what was on the other side, the man whose response to that vision was so extreme that he invented a weapon designed to delete his own brain. His name is Fiddleford McGucket. The show introduces him in season 1 as a babbling hillbilly who lives in the town dump, occasionally crashes social events screaming about doom, and gets laughed at by the locals. He's a recurring joke character for the first half of season 1. He builds a giant robot in Boss Mabel. He sings nonsense songs. He chases pigeons. He is, in every sense, the comic relief crazy old man you'd expect a cartoon to use for cheap laughs. And then Society of the Blind Eye airs in season 2 and reframes the entire character into one of the most quietly horrifying arcs in modern animation. Fiddleford Old Man McGucket was once a brilliant inventor who worked with Stanford Pines to create the trans-universal portal underneath the Mystery Shack, and during a mishap while testing it, he was nearly sucked in and saw something on the other side, and whatever he saw scarred him forever, leading him to create a memory gun and the Blind Eye Society, and over decades of blasting himself with the memory gun, McGucket lost all of his sanity. McGucket wasn't always insane. He was an MIT-trained engineer with a software company. He was Ford's best friend. He helped build the machine. He stuck his head into the portal once, briefly, during a test run, and saw the Nightmare Realm. And what he saw was so far outside the boundaries of what his 3-dimensional brain was equipped to process, that he decided calmly and methodically to invent a machine that would erase his memory of it. And then he used the machine, and then he kept using the machine for decades. The genius of the McGucket arc is what it lets the show do with the idea of memory as horror. Most cartoons handle trauma as a single dramatic flashback. Gravity Falls does something different. McGucket is the inverse of trauma processing. He is what happens when you refuse to remember. Every time he uses the gun, he loses a little more of himself. He stops being able to think clearly. He starts losing the words for things. His teeth fall out. He moves out of his house and into the dump. His son Tate refuses to speak to him. By the time the show begins, the man is barely a person anymore. He's the residue of a person who chose 20 years earlier that not remembering was worth not being. McGucket founded the Blind Eye Society in 1982, intending to help remove some unwanted memories from others using a device he created and used continuously on himself. And while McGucket's mind deteriorated from the negative side effects of the contraption, the society soldiered on in utter secrecy, now intent on keeping the citizens of Gravity Falls blissfully ignorant of the town's supernatural secrets. And here's where the show turns personal trauma into civic horror. McGucket didn't just erase himself. He built a cult around the idea. He recruited other townspeople who were also suffering from the impossible things they kept witnessing in Gravity Falls. Gnomes in the parking lot, ghosts in the convenience store, time travelers at the diner, and offered them all the same exit. Forget it. Pay no fee. Walk out of the basement of the museum with a clean head and a clean conscience. The episode lets you sit with the moral question. The Society of the Blind Eye operates beneath the Gravity Falls Museum of History, accessible via an entrance concealed by a fireplace in a room full of variations of eye sculptures, and the underground chamber consists of both a large circular room, in which the memory-erasing gun rests, as well as the Hall of the Forgotten, which houses the repressed and supernatural memories of the citizens of Gravity Falls. The Hall of the Forgotten is, functionally, a library of stolen souls. Every glass tube on the wall contains a memory that used to belong to a person walking around Gravity Falls thinking their life was fine. Lazy Susan, the waitress at the diner. Toby Determined, the local journalist. Bud Gleeful, Gideon's father. All of them have tubes in this hall. All of them are missing pieces of themselves. They don't even know are gone. The town is functional because its citizens are partially lobotomized, and the lobotomies are voluntary. And the volunteers think they're getting a service done. It's a public health system run on amnesia. The Latin phrase, the cult chants, when erasing memories is the chef's kiss. The sentence Novus Ordo Seclorum, the members enchant before erasing a person's memory, is Latin for New Order of the Ages. That phrase is on the back of the American $1 bill, underneath the same pyramid with an eye symbol that Bill Cipher resembles. Hirsch and his team picked the most famous conspiracy-coded phrase in American iconography and used it as the prayer of a cult that exists to delete inconvenient memories from ordinary people. The Blind Eye Society isn't just a creepy local group. It's a parody of every shadowy organization, and it's run by a man who started it because he couldn't live with what he saw, and ended it because he forgot it was his own idea. Society of the Blind Eye is the episode where Dipper, Mabel, Seuss, Wendy, and McGucket himself break into the cult's headquarters and recover his stolen memories. It's a heist episode in shape. There's a guarded vault. There's a code to crack. There's a time limit before the cult catches them. But underneath the heist, it's a portrait of restoration. They find McGucket's tube. They open it. They project the memory onto a wall. And for a moment, the audience watches Old Man McGucket see his own past. McGucket finds his memory tube in a place of honor in the hall, and although the revelation is stunning, McGucket is happy to know who he used to be, and now he can move on and recover. He sees himself as a young man with a wife and a son and a brilliant career. He sees Ford, he sees the portal, he sees the moment he stuck his head into the machine and lost his ability to be a human being. And instead of breaking under the weight of it, he smiles. He's relieved because for the first time in decades, he knows who he is. He knows what he lost. He knows what he abandoned. And from that moment, slowly, painfully, he starts coming back. That's the thesis of the McGucket arc, and it's secretly the thesis of the whole show. Forgetting hurts more than remembering the cult. Thought they were helping people. They were destroying them. McGucket spent 20 years trying to outrun a single bad memory, and the running was worse than the memory ever was. The only way back was to look at the thing he was afraid of and own it. The kids gave him that chance, and from that episode forward, McGucket starts cleaning up. He invents again. He builds. By the finale of the series, the broken hillbilly from the dump is one of the most important strategic minds in the resistance against Bill Cipher. After Society of the Blind Eye, McGucket regained most of his sanity, and by the end of Weirdmageddon 3, Take Back the Falls was fully back to normal. Helping defeat Bill and reconciling with his son Tate, he moves into the Northwest Mansion at the end of the show, the same mansion that exiled him as a poor man, because his contributions to defeating Bill have been so significant that the town basically gives him a palace as a thank you. The poorest man in Gravity Falls becomes the richest in a single summer. The arc is a redemption arc, but it's also a rebuke of the show's own joke. Every time you laughed at McGucket in Season 1, the show was setting up the punchline that the man you were laughing at was a tragedy in slow motion. By Season 2, you can't laugh at him anymore. You can only feel sorry for what he did to himself, and grateful that the kids gave him a way out. One more thing about Society of the Blind Eye that's worth dwelling on, because it tells you everything about how Hirsch ran the show. The post-credits scene of the episode shows the portal in the Mystery Shack basement, starting to pull objects through it from the other side. A mug, a pencil, a notepad. They get sucked through the rift and disappear into another dimension. It's a tiny moment, 20 seconds long, designed to remind the audience that the portal is still working and dangerous. The cup, notepad, and pen that gets sucked into the interdimensional portal in the credits scene previously appeared in the Season 1 Episode 10 of adult animated series Rick and Morty, which was released 6 months earlier. The mug came from Rick and Morty. The crossover is canon in both shows. Hirsch and Dan Harmon coordinated the joke 6 months in advance, hiding the objects in a Rick and Morty episode about the multiverse, knowing they'd reappear in a Gravity Falls post-credit scene that nobody would catch unless they watched both shows obsessively. The Pines basement and the Smith garage are connected. The interdimensional portal in the Mystery Shack is, in canon, the same portal network Rick uses to travel between universes. The shared continuity has never been officially expanded, but the wink is in there in writing, and it works because Hirsch trusted his audience to catch it. That's a Disney show on a kid's network, deliberately staging a continuity bridge, with an Adult Swim show that features a chronically depressed alcoholic genius and a clone of Adolf Hitler. The audacity of the move is its own kind of genius. Hirsch didn't ask permission, he just did it. And now, 10 years later, fans still write essays about whether Bill Cipher and Rick Sanchez exist in the same multiverse. The crossover seeded a fandom debate that has outlived the show itself. When you step back and look at the McGucket arc inside the larger structure of the show, a pattern starts to emerge. Every major character in Gravity Falls is hiding from something. Stan is hiding from the night he punched his brother through a portal. Ford is hiding from the deal he made with Bill. McGucket is hiding from what he saw in the rift. The townspeople are hiding from the gnomes in their backyards. Gideon's father is hiding from the fact that his son is a sociopath. Pacifica is hiding from her family's racist history. Robbie is hiding from his own feelings about Wendy. Wendy is hiding from her grief over her dead mother. Mabel is hiding from the fact that summer is going to end. The whole town is built on a foundation of avoidance, and the show argues episode by episode that every act of hiding eventually costs you more than the thing you were hiding from. The journals exist because Ford was brave enough to write down what was hurting him. The Mystery Shack exists because Stan was brave enough to keep working on the portal even when the world told him to quit. The defeat of Bill Cipher, when it finally comes, doesn't happen through the Zodiac Wheel or any other piece of ancient magic. It happens because two old men finally tell each other the truth. But we're getting ahead of ourselves again. Before we get to that finale, we have to talk about how the show handles possession, sacrifice, and the relationship between Dipper and Mabel, because the episode that puts those three ideas in a blender is the same episode where the cartoon villain stops being a cartoon villain and becomes the most terrifying thing on the show. The episode is Sock Opera, and what Bill Cipher does inside Dipper's body in those 22 minutes is, frame for frame, some of the most genuinely disturbing material ever broadcast on the Disney Channel. The episode where the joke stopped being a joke, Sock Opera, aired on September 8, 2014. It's the 4th episode of Season 2. On paper, it should be a goofy filler episode. Mabel has a crush on a child puppeteer named Gabe Benson, who only dates girls who put on elaborate puppet shows for him, and she ropes the entire cast into spending 3 sleepless days building socks with googly eyes for the most cursed school production in TV history. That's the A-plot. It's a comedy. There's a song. There's a slow-motion shot of a sock puppet of Stan exploding on stage. The B-plot is where the show quietly commits a crime against the audience's nervous system. The B-plot is that Dipper has been trying to crack the password on a laptop recovered from the author's secret bunker. The laptop is the next step in the journal mystery. If he can get into it, he gets answers. He hasn't slept in days. He's spent every spare minute on the password. He's exhausted, he's stressed, he's vulnerable. And in walks Bill Cipher, smiling with a deal. Bill Cipher reappears, giving Dipper an ultimatum: accept the deal, or have the laptop's secrets erased forever. And all Bill wants is a puppet, and Bill slyly reminds Dipper of all the times he has sacrificed his own wants for Mabel, who has never seemed to return any favors. The setup is brilliant because it weaponizes the most loving sibling dynamic on the show against itself. Bill spends a full minute reminding Dipper, accurately, that he has spent the entire summer putting Mabel's needs ahead of his own. He gave up Wendy so Mabel could keep Waddles. He gave up his pool job so Mabel could be with Mermando. He has been a good brother. He has been an unfailingly good brother. And what has Mabel given up for him? Bill's not lying. The audience is sitting there going, well, actually, yeah, she does take a lot, doesn't she? And then Bill closes the deal. Just a puppet. One of Mabel's surplus puppets. She has dozens. She won't miss one. The countdown on the laptop hits its final seconds. Dipper shakes Bill's hand. As they shake hands closing the deal, Dipper asks Bill which puppet he wanted, and Bill mockingly ponders his answer before turning on Dipper and takes possession of his body and kicking Dipper's consciousness out. The puppet was Dipper? The whole conversation was a feint. The word puppet has two meanings, and Bill picked the second one. Dipper is now a ghost watching a one-eyed demon walk around in his own body, and his body is in pain because Bill is enjoying himself. The episode where the joke stopped being a joke. This is the scene where Bill stops being funny. He stretches Dipper's joints in directions. Joints don't go. He bites his own arm. He throws himself downstairs. He pulls his own hair. His utter joy at having the use of a body again quickly manifests as a deeply unhealthy fascination with self-inflicted pain. And there's his casual verbal harassment of Wendy, and the suitably unhinged design of Bill-possessed Dipper. And Alex Hirsch's manic voiceover work sells this otherwise underwhelming 12-year-old boy as a genuine threat. The animation team draws Dipper's eyes wrong. The pupils dilate. The smile gets wider than a smile should be. Hirsch, who voices Bill, drops the high-pitched cartoon register and adds a kind of breathy delight that doesn't belong in a children's show. Bill walks into the room where Wendy is hanging out and makes Dipper say things to her that the real Dipper would never say. Wendy laughs uncomfortably. The audience does not laugh. The audience has been watching this 12-year-old boy crush on Wendy for 2 seasons, and now a demon is using his face to creep on her. And the show doesn't blink. The reason this works as horror is because the show has spent 30 episodes earning your investment in Dipper as a kid. He's the audience surrogate. He's the careful one, the cautious one, the one who reads the journal before walking into the room. And now he's locked out of his own skull, watching a being 1 trillion years old desecrate his body for sport. The horror isn't supernatural, it's intimate. It's the specific intimate violation of having something you trust, your own face, your own hands, used against you by something that doesn't care. The sister who refused to trade. The climax of Sock Opera is one of the most quietly devastating exchanges in the show. Mabel is on stage. Her puppet opera is finally happening. 3 days of work. The boy she has a crush on is in the audience. The thing she has been chasing all summer. The affection of a cute, weird, theater kid boy is finally within reach. And Bill, wearing Dipper's body, corners her backstage with a wedding cake hanging over the set. He has the journal. He wants the journal destroyed. He's threatening to drop the cake on the stage and ruin Mabel's show if she doesn't hand over the book. Mabel refuses at first, claiming the book belonged to Dipper, but Bill tries to guilt and cajole her into giving the journal up, pointedly stating that she had no problem taking the journal for herself and ditching Dipper when Dipper needed her. And Mabel hesitantly relents, giving him the book. Mabel almost folds. She's 12. She has spent 3 sleepless days on this show. The boy is right there. And Bill is being precise earlier in the episode. Mabel did take Dipper's time and Dipper's energy for her own ends. The accusation is true. She wasn't malicious about it, but she did do it. The show gives Bill the kindest, sharpest knife in the kitchen and lets him put the tip against the most vulnerable part of Mabel's self-image. And then Bill makes the mistake. Bill laughingly gloats. Who would sacrifice everything they'd worked for just for their dumb sibling? And Mabel, strengthened by all that Dipper's done for her, yanks the book back, dragging Bill into the cake and onto the stage. Mabel's answer is one syllable. Dipper would. 2 words. The entire moral argument of the show, compressed into a sentence small enough to fit on a sticky note. Bill thought he was making a rhetorical point. Mabel heard him asking a genuine question and answered honestly. Dipper would sacrifice everything for his dumb sibling. Mabel knows it. Mabel has lived it. And the moment she remembers that, the spell of Bill's manipulation breaks, and she rips the journal back. And the wedding cake falls, and she ruins her own show to save her brother. The exchange is the moment that evil cannot comprehend good plays as a trope. Bill Cipher says, who would sacrifice everything they've worked for just for their dumb sibling? And Mabel replies, Dipper would. Bill thought he was being rhetorical. He genuinely could not imagine that any creature anywhere would burn down their own dream for the sake of someone else. A trillion years of his own self-interest had calcified into a worldview that couldn't picture love as a real force. Mabel, 12 years old, working off 3 days of no sleep and a costume covered in glitter, broke his entire epistemology with 2 words. This is the show's central thesis stated cleanly. Bill Cipher is unbeatable on paper. He has powers. Dipper doesn't have. He has knowledge Ford doesn't have. He has age and patience and resources no human can match. But he cannot fundamentally understand the choice to sacrifice for someone else. He destroyed his own dimension because he couldn't share what he saw. He came to Earth because he couldn't be alone. Every action he takes is in service of himself. And against that worldview, the show keeps placing siblings, Stan and Ford, Dipper and Mabel, and asking what happens when 2 people decide their bond is worth more than what they could each gain by walking away. The answer every time is that Bill loses. Not because he's outgunned, because he's outloved. The mirror cipher at the heart of it. Sock opera ends with a cipher that, decoded, becomes one of the most quoted lines in the fandom. After the credits roll, a page fragment appears on screen. Cipher symbols, numbers. The kind of cryptogram fans had learned to decode by season 2 with their eyes closed. The encoded message at the end of the episode translates to, "No puppet strings can hold me down. So patiently I watch this town. Abnormal soon will be the norm. Enjoy the calm before the storm." The villain is rhyming. The villain is taunting the audience directly. The villain is announcing in code that Weirdmageddon is coming, and he's doing it as a piece of doggerel, because that's the kind of creature he is, the kind that giggles while writing his own apocalypse threats in iambic tetrameter. There's also the mirror. The keyword sipper can be seen in the mirror's reflection after Bill Cipher possesses Dipper. The animators put a Bill-specific clue inside the reflection of a mirror in Dipper's room, visible only if you pause and look at the inverted text. The episode that introduces the audience to body horror possession on Disney Channel also includes a literal mirror image of the villain's name as a visual signature. That's not lazy. That's a crew that has spent 4 months on a single episode and refused to let any frame go unweaponized. Every mirror in this episode is the demon looking back. Every reflection is a confession. Why? Sock opera matters. Most cartoons don't get to do this. Most cartoons have to make their villains scary. In big set-piece episodes, the season finale, the 2-part special, the dramatic reveal, Gravity Falls used a B-plot in a sock puppet comedy episode to deliver the scariest possession sequence in animated children's television. The choice is genius because it inverts the genre. The audience comes in expecting laughs. The episode delivers the laughs, and then mid-laugh, the show puts a knife in your chest and twists it. You can't brace for sock opera because the title sounds like a joke. You watch it expecting a sock to explode, and instead Bill Cipher snaps a child's wrist for fun. The episode is also the moment the show commits to its central question. After sock opera, the writers can't pretend Bill is a once-an-episode threat anymore. The audience has seen what he can do up close. The audience has seen the smile he wears in someone else's face. The audience has heard the line Mabel said when she didn't know she was saying the thesis of the series. Dipper would. And from this episode forward, the show is no longer about whether the twins will encounter another monster of the week. It's about whether they'll survive the slow approach of a demon who has watched them in the cipher of the end credits since the very first episode aired. The other thing Sock Opera sets up is the cost of the journal mystery. Dipper has been chasing the answers in the journal for 2 seasons. He's been treating the book like a textbook, like a guide, like a treasure. And in this episode, Bill teaches him that the journal can also be a curse. Wanting answers can make you stupid. Trusting a triangle in a top hat, because he promises information can get you possessed in your own bedroom. The journal isn't a reward, the journal is bait, and every time Dipper opens it, something in the woods opens an eye and looks at him. The show will pay this off again, harder, in the last Mabelcorn, when Ford reveals he made the exact same deal with Bill in his 20s for the exact same reason, with the exact same outcome. 2 generations of Pine's men, both brilliant, both lonely, both convinced they were smart enough to outsmart a triangle. Both wrong. The show keeps drawing the line from young to old, from Dipper to Ford, from the kid handing over a sock puppet body to the scientist handing over the keys to a portal. The mistake is the same, the shape of the mistake is the same, and in both cases the family member who saves them is the one Bill underestimated. Mabel for Dipper, Stan for Ford. The unloved brother, the supposedly dumb sibling, the one who doesn't have a journal and doesn't have a PhD and doesn't have a research grant. They show up, they throw the punch, they drag the cake onto the stage, and they break the demon's grip with the one tool he never accounted for, someone who would burn down a sock opera to save them. That's the engine of the show, and it runs all the way to the finale. But before we get there, there's a quieter genius to talk about, because Gravity Falls didn't just do horror well. It also did class warfare, gothic mystery, and the most surprising character redemption in Disney history. And it did all 3 in a single episode, the night the ghost of a dead lumberjack walked through the wall of the Northwest Mansion. The episode that did gothic horror in a children's cartoon. 5 episodes after Sock Opera, the show airs Northwest Mansion Mystery. It's the 7th episode of Season 2. It aired February 16, 2015, and it's the moment Gravity Falls quietly demonstrated that it could do. An entirely different genre than the one it had been doing for 40 episodes. Up to this point, the show had been a comedy with horror flourishes. Northwest Mansion Mystery is a horror story with comedy flourishes. The flip is so smooth. Most viewers didn't even notice the show had changed gears until the credits rolled and they realized their hands were sweaty. The premise is simple enough. Pacifica Northwest, the rich girl antagonist, who had spent most of Season 1 being mean to Mabel, shows up at the Mystery Shack and asks Dipper to come to her family's mansion. There's a ghost. The Northwests are throwing a fancy party for the town's elite, and the ghost is going to ruin it. Dipper, now confident enough in his paranormal skills to act as the town's unofficial Ghostbuster, agrees. He brings the journal, he brings his hat, he arrives at the gate of the mansion in his bow tie and discovers, slowly, that the Northwest family has been hiding a multi-generational atrocity in their basement. Aside from its outright graphic horror, including bleeding animal heads, and how it managed to get a Y7 rating, Northwest Mansion Mystery stood out from the other episodes of Gravity Falls by cutting out most of the major cast, with Wendy Suze and Grunkle Stan not making any kind of appearances and Mabel relegated to a pretty minor side plot, with Candy and Grenda instead focusing on Dipper, now confident enough in his paranormal skills that he is more or less the town's Ghostbuster and Pacifica Northwest. The episode deliberately strips down to 2 characters. It removes the safety net of the ensemble. It puts Dipper and Pacifica alone in a haunted house with a ghost who can possess people. And it lets the camera linger on the animal heads on the wall as they start bleeding. The blood in this episode is animated wet. The teeth on the ghost are drawn sharp. The wallpaper is dark wood instead of the cheerful pastels of the Mystery Shack. The whole visual palette of the show shifts for 22 minutes into something closer to a Hammer horror film, and the show doesn't apologize for the shift. It just does it, and trusts the audience to follow. The ghost is the spirit of a lumberjack who built the original Northwest Mansion. The Northwests, 150 years ago, promised this lumberjack and the other working-class men who built their estate that they would open the gates of the mansion to the town every year in gratitude. For the labor that made the family rich, the mansion was completed. The party was promised. The Northwests reneged. They locked the gates and let the workers stand outside in a mudslide that killed several of them, including the lumberjack. The lumberjack's ghost has been haunting the mansion ever since, returning every 150 years to demand that the family honor the original promise. The promise has never been honored. The Northwests have spent 6 generations stiffing a ghost. This is a heavier piece of writing than a Disney show usually attempts. The horror in Northwest Mansion Mystery isn't really the ghost. The ghost is the consequence. The horror is the family. The horror is that one of the richest, most powerful dynasties in the town has been founded on a betrayal of working-class people, and that every generation of Northwests has been complicit in the betrayal, and that the family has trained its children, including Pacifica, to ring a bell that signals them to behave the way the parents demand. Pacifica's relationship with her parents, and the bell her father uses to control her behavior, ringing it whenever she steps out of line, is a Pavlovian conditioning device that her family has used to shape her into a perfect heiress, and the bell is more unnerving than a more overt threat. The bell is a small detail. It rings 3 notes. Pacifica flinches every time. Her father pulls it whenever she says something that doesn't match the script. The show never says the word abuse. It doesn't need to. The audience watches a 13-year-old girl flinch at a bell, and the diagnosis writes itself. The heiress who walked out. What Northwest Mansion Mystery does that almost no other episode in the show does is give its character growth to someone outside the Pines family. Pacifica had been the show's most one-dimensional antagonist for almost 2 seasons. She was rich. She was mean. She made fun of Mabel's sweaters. She was a stock antagonist in the mold of every Disney mean girl who has ever existed. And in 22 minutes, the show takes that character and reveals the entire architecture underneath her. Pacifica showed some signs of growth in the Gulf War, the first episode. To treat her as anything more than the anti-Mabel, and Mansion Mystery shed even more light on her, with the episode also creating an entertaining dynamic by pairing 2 characters who had never really interacted before, since up until now, Pacifica had been exclusively used in Mabel storylines. The pairing with Dipper rather than Mabel is the key move. Pacifica with Mabel is a rivalry. Pacifica with Dipper is a conversation, because Dipper has no investment in being her enemy. He treats her with cautious professionalism. She treats him with cautious sarcasm. And somewhere in the middle of the haunting, when the wallpaper starts bleeding and the chandeliers are crashing down, the 2 of them stop performing for each other and start being honest. Pacifica is terrified of her parents. She didn't ask to be a Northwest. She doesn't want to ring the bell and change her dress. She wants to do something good for once in her life, and she doesn't know how. The episode's climax is the moment that turns the character around. The ghost demands the gates of the mansion be opened. Pacifica's parents refuse because letting common townspeople into the mansion would ruin the party. The wood of the house starts crawling up Dipper's legs, threatening to absorb him into the wall as punishment for trying to fix what the Northwests broke. Pacifica has the key. She can end this. Her father rings the bell. Feeling guilty over Dipper's sacrifice and her familial history, Pacifica opens up the gates, and the townsfolk rush in, making an immediate mess of the place. And in a moment of profound character growth, Pacifica chooses to defy her parents' wishes and sacrifice her family's reputation for the greater good, demonstrating a capacity for empathy and a willingness to challenge the values she has been taught her entire life. She opens the gate. She lets the town in. The ghost is satisfied and dispels. Her parents look at her like she has betrayed everything they ever stood for, and she looks back at them for the first time in her life, like she is not afraid of the bell anymore. The episode ends on her face. She's smiling, but it's not a happy smile. It's the smile of someone who has just figured out that the cage they were in had a door, and the door was always unlocked. That moment recontextualizes every previous Pacifica appearance. Every cruel line she said to Mabel was a parrot of her parents. Every snobbish gesture was a survival behavior in a household that punished kindness. The show doesn't excuse her past behavior, but it explains it. And in explaining it, it makes her one of the most surprisingly complex characters in the entire ensemble. By the time the finale rolls around, Pacifica is in the Resistance, fighting alongside the Pines family, having permanently estranged herself from her own family's worldview. She doesn't become Mabel. She doesn't have to. She just becomes herself. Class critique in a triangle-eyed cartoon. The episode is also unusually pointed about wealth as a system. The Northwests aren't bad because they're rich, they're bad because their wealth is stolen. The lumberjack ghost is, in the show's metaphor, a labor movement. He worked. He died. He was promised payment. The payment was never delivered, and the ghost has been knocking on the door for 150 years asking for what he was owed. The Pines family broke, scrappy, working a tourist trap, sends a 13-year-old kid to mediate, and the kid, by accident, ends up being the catalyst that finally forces the rich family to honor the debt their ancestors created. The Northwests manage to escape their woody demise, once again, selfishly profiting from screwing over the less fortunate and believing Pacifica to be just like her parents. Dipper ditches her and attempts to stop the ghost himself, with the scream he lets out as the wood crawls up his legs, being nothing short of blood-curdling. Dipper's sacrifice in that moment is what convinces Pacifica to act. He didn't ask her to help him. He just walked into the trap willingly, because somebody had to, and watching him scream as the cursed wood eats his body forces Pacifica into the recognition that her family has been letting other people get devoured for their convenience for generations. The show stages a labor grievance as a haunted house climax and lets a teenage girl break the cycle. There's also McGucket's involvement in the episode that points forward. McGucket appears at the end of the episode, delivering a cryptic warning about something big coming, which looms large over the credits. He shows up out of nowhere, gripping a tinfoil hat, telling the kids that the end of the world is coming and that they need to prepare. The show has been training the audience to dismiss McGucket as a lovable lunatic for 2 seasons, but post-Society of the Blind Eye, the audience knows he's recovering his memories. So when he shows up at the end of Northwest Mansion Mystery, babbling about doom, the audience can no longer write him off. He's right. He's been right the whole time. The man with the broken brain is the only person in town who has been telling the truth about what's coming since the show began. That double-layered redemption, Pacifica getting hers, McGucket gaining credibility, happens in the same 22 minutes. 2 of the show's least respected characters become 2 of its most important characters. In a single episode, that's an extraordinary efficiency. Most shows would spread that work across half a season. Gravity Falls did it in one Sunday night. The genre tour. What Northwest Mansion Mystery really demonstrates is the show's appetite for genre tourism. Gravity Falls treats genre the way a jazz musician treats time signatures, something to play with, not something to obey. The show has done body horror possession in sock opera. It's done a heist film in Society of the Blind Eye. It will do a video game parody in Suze and the Real Girl, a found footage horror in Scarioke, a time travel paradox piece in The Time Traveler's Pig, a stoner comedy with prehistoric monsters in Land Before Swine, a Cape Fear thriller in Roadside Attraction, a children's adventure with multiverse implications in Dipper and Mabel vs. the Future, and a full-blown apocalypse with Mad Max imagery in Weirdmageddon Part 2. The genre roulette would feel ADHD on a lesser show. On Gravity Falls, it works, because each genre experiment serves a character function. The body horror in sock opera exists to violate Dipper. The Gothic mansion in Northwest Mansion Mystery exists to free Pacifica. The post-apocalypse in Weirdmageddon exists to test whether Mabel can give up her fantasy of an eternal summer. The genre changes, but the character arcs hold, and every time the show puts on a new costume, the costume reveals something the previous costume couldn't show you. That's the discipline that made the show genius. Anyone can switch genres. Almost nobody can switch genres while keeping their character work consistent. Hirsch's team did it for 40 episodes. They did it while also hiding Cypher messages in the credits, while also running an alternate reality game on outside websites, while also fighting Disney's censors over individual words, while also building a multi-generational family epic in 22-minute installments. The work rate is absurd. The output is, somehow, coherent. But the genre piece that hits hardest, the one that does the show's heaviest emotional lifting, is the finale arc. 3 episodes, an hour and 10 minutes total. The end of the world. And inside that end of the world, the show makes its most uncomfortable argument, that the hardest thing in life isn't fighting a demon. The hardest thing in life is letting the summer end. And the character who can't let it end is the same character whose 2-word answer broke Bill Cipher in sock opera. We have to talk about Mabel's bubble. The first half of Season 2 builds to a moment that the show keeps quietly setting up across multiple episodes. Mabel's birthday is approaching. The birthday is on August 31, the end of summer, the day she and Dipper turn 13, the day the train comes to take them back home to Piedmont, California, away from the Mystery Shack, away from Wendy and Seuss and Stan and the woods, and back to a normal 6th grade life where there are no gnomes in the parking lot and no ghosts in the attic. Mabel has spent the entire summer pretending this day isn't coming. The show has been quietly showing you the calendar this whole time. The breakdown happens in Dipper and Mabel versus the future, the episode right before the apocalypse begins. Ford offers Dipper an apprenticeship. He wants Dipper to stay in Gravity Falls, drop out of the world he came from, and become his student in the paranormal sciences. Dipper, who has spent 2 seasons feeling like he doesn't fit in with kids his age, and like he does fit in with this town, says yes. Mabel overhears, and Mabel, who has been the one person Dipper has always come home to, suddenly understands that her brother is choosing the summer over her. He's choosing the woods, he's choosing Ford. He's choosing a future where she's not the most important person in his life anymore. She runs into the forest, sobbing, holding a backpack she thinks contains a tool that can help her. And a man named Blendin Blandin, the time traveler from the wallpaper of episode 1, offers her exactly what she wants. He offers her the means to stop the summer from ending. He gives her a glass globe. He doesn't tell her what it does, he just tells her that, whatever she does with it, summer won't end. Mabel takes it. She runs back to the Mystery Shack. She hands it to Bill Cipher's accomplices without knowing she's doing it. And the globe contains the dimensional rift, the rip in reality that Ford has been guarding for 30 years. And the moment Bill gets his hands on it, the apocalypse begins. This is the genius cruelty of the show's writing. Mabel doesn't end the world because she's evil. She ends the world because she's 12 and scared. She doesn't want to grow up. She doesn't want her brother to leave her. She doesn't want this summer to be over. And the universe gives her exactly what she asked for in the form of a glass marble. And the cost of getting what she asked for is the destruction of every dimensional barrier on Earth. The apocalypse is a child's tantrum, given infinite power, delivered by a triangle that has been waiting for someone vulnerable enough to use. When Bill takes over the town, he traps Mabel inside a bubble, not by force, as a reward. He builds her a fantasy world made out of her own desires, a candy-colored kingdom called Mabeland, where everyone agrees with her, where her brother is replaced by a more enthusiastic version of himself named Dippy Fresh, where her boyfriends from the summer all gather and adore her, and where time, crucially, does not move forward. The bubble is paradise. The bubble is also a prison. The bubble is the version of her summer she wishes existed, frozen, perfect, eternal. And Bill knows that the only way to neutralize the shooting star symbol on the zodiac wheel is to give her exactly what she thinks she wants. In Weirdmageddon 2, Escape from Reality, Dipper, Wendy, and Seuss find her in her bubble sleeping in a tower, guarded by giant waffles with knives, and the group raids the tower to save Mabel. But when Mabel wakes up, she reveals that she created a place called Mabeland inside the bubble, and she does not wish to leave. The rescue isn't a rescue, because the captive doesn't want to leave. Dipper, Wendy, and Seuss break in expecting to find Mabel chained up and scared. They find her ruling a kingdom of her own design, smiling, with a crown on her head, surrounded by friends who never disappoint her. She has no reason to come back to the real world. The real world is the place where summer ends, where her brother leaves, where she gets older. Mabeland is the place where nothing ends. The show then does something extraordinary. It puts Dipper on trial. Dipper attempts to persuade Mabel to leave her imaginary world, but Mabel instead shows she created a more supportive brother, Dippy Fresh, in replacement of Dipper and prefers to stay. And when Dipper is arrested for mentioning reality, Mabel saves him from banishment, but Dipper is tried in court for fantasy versus reality. Mabel's subconscious literally puts her brother on trial for the crime of telling the truth. The prosecution is fantasy. The defense is reality. The court is rigged. Mabel has constructed a world where anyone who reminds her of her fears can be exiled. The argument, the trial stages, fantasy versus reality, growing up versus staying the same, the brother she knows versus the brother she invented, is the whole emotional thesis of the back half of the season. Zyler and Kraz present Mabel's case, showing Dipper and Mabel's unfortunate events through their years. But Dipper counter-argues that Mabel simply wanted to escape reality because she didn't want to grow up. Dipper makes the speech the show has been building toward. He tells his sister that he's scared too. He tells her that growing up is hard for everybody. He tells her that he doesn't have all the answers. And he tells her that an imaginary world isn't going to make the fear go away. The bubble is comfortable, but the bubble is also a coffin. Time will still pass outside it. The people she loves will still get older without her. And the only way to survive that fear is to step out of the bubble and face it. The underlying message is that Mabel saves herself and soothes herself through fantasy and imagination and wonder. And Mabeland is a distillation of all the fun you have as a kid. And Mabel desperately wants to hold on to this fun because Mabel does not want to grow up. And growing up means more painful moments and the distinct possibility of losing her brother. The Mabel arc is the most adult piece of writing in the whole series. It looks like a sugar-coated Bubble episode. It is in fact a portrait of dissociation, of the fantasy life a person builds when the actual life starts feeling too big, of the way that comfort can become a trap. The show doesn't moralize about it. It doesn't punish Mabel. It just lets her recognize, slowly, that the version of her brother she invented isn't the version of her brother she actually loves. Dippy Fresh, the replacement, is sycophantic. He agrees with everything. He never pushes back. And Mabel realizes, watching him, that she doesn't actually want a brother who agrees with her. She wants Dipper, the real one, the one who corrects her, the one who worries about her, the one who is also scared of growing up, but is willing to do it anyway. She steps out of the bubble, it pops, Mabeland collapses into rainbow sparkles and falls into the rest of the apocalypse, and Mabel walks out into the smoking ruin of Gravity Falls in her pink sweater with the shooting star on it, ready to fight. The use of foreshadowing elevates Weirdmageddon Part 1 from a simple action-packed spectacle to a deeply satisfying narrative climax. And Mabel's bubble is a microcosm of her character, representing her desire to escape reality and live in a world of her own creation, where everything is perfect and nothing ever changes. But this idealized world is ultimately unsustainable and unhealthy, highlighting Mabel's fear of growing up and facing the complexities of life, a theme that is explored throughout the series. The apocalypse in Gravity Falls is, at its heart, a metaphor for adolescence. Weirdmageddon is what happens when a child is given infinite power over their own perception of time and refuses to let things change. The world cracks, the sky bleeds, demons walk out of the rift, and the only way to stop it is for the child at the center of it to admit that the thing she's afraid of getting older is a thing she has to accept anyway. That's a brutal piece of writing for a Disney show. Most kids' media tells you that growing up is fun, that 13 is a great age, that the teen years are exciting. Gravity Falls tells you in the apocalypse that growing up is the scariest thing a person can do, that it costs you something real, that it makes a part of your own self disappear forever, and that the only response that doesn't destroy the world is to do it anyway. The show grants Mabel her fear, treats it as legitimate, and then asks her to walk through it. That's an enormous request to make of a 12-year-old character. The fact that the writers trusted their audience to receive it to sit with the discomfort of an apocalypse caused by their favorite character's emotional avoidance, is part of why the show holds up. Outside the bubble, Stan, Soos, Wendy, and the other survivors of Bill's invasion have barricaded themselves inside the Mystery Shack. The shack, it turns out, was built by Ford, with a layer of spell work designed to keep Bill out. The Mystery Shack is the one place Bill cannot enter due to the physical barrier seen in Weirdmageddon. The same barrier referenced in Bill's inability to enter the shack in Dreamscaperers. The tourist trap is Sanctuary. The fake mystery house is the one real magical structure in Gravity Falls. Ford built it that way. Stan kept it standing for 30 years without knowing why the wallpaper had so many extra layers. The con was a fortress all along. The shack as fortress is one of the most quietly satisfying details in the Apocalypse arc. Every recurring joke about the shack's cheapness, its tacky exhibits, its overcharging tourists, gets retconned into a survival strategy. The taxidermied Sasquatch in the lobby is now a wartime decoration. The eye-bats outside can't get in, because the rune on the porch is genuine. The vending machine that hides the elevator to the basement is the door to the Resistance's command center. Stan, who has spent 2 seasons as a buffoon, now walks the perimeter with a baseball bat, organizing defenses, feeding the displaced townspeople, holding the line. Stan was always the muscle of the Pines twins, the one who could throw a punch when his brother needed the muscle, and now the Apocalypse has put him back in his original job. The music to the fight between the Shacktron and the Henchmaniacs is a rock remix of the theme song in true mecha anime fashion. The survivors weld together the Mystery Shack itself into a giant robot, the Shacktron, piloted by Soos and equipped with a fist made out of a Sasquatch arm. The show in its final hour becomes a mecha anime. Gravity Falls did Monster of the Week, it did Body Horror, it did Gothic Mansion, and now, for the Apocalypse, it does giant robot battle in the streets of a town. It has turned into a Mad Max wasteland. The genre tour ends with the show in costume, as every cartoon it ever loved at once. But the Resistance, the giant robot, the Zodiac Wheel, none of these are the thing that actually beats Bill. The show has been telling you the answer since season 1. The thing that beats Bill is the same thing that beat him in sock opera. 2 siblings who would burn down their own dreams for each other. 2 siblings who don't need a prophecy. 2 siblings who, after a lifetime of pulling apart, finally do the thing they should have done in 1982. The thing they should have done was forgive each other. And we'll talk about how that scene plays out in the next chunk. Because the way the writers stage the final defeat of Bill Cipher is a piece of emotional storytelling so precise that it makes the rest of the Apocalypse look like a warm-up. The end of Gravity Falls is not a battle. The end of Gravity Falls is a brother sitting in a chair, getting his mind erased, while his twin holds him and says goodbye to the only person who ever really understood him. And the show pulls it off in 22 minutes on a Saturday morning on Disney XD. The finale of Gravity Falls is called Weirdmageddon 3, Take Back the Falls. It ran as a 1-hour special on February 15, 2016. It is, structurally, the 3rd act of a 3-part finale that began with Weirdmageddon Part 1 and continued through Weirdmageddon 2, Escape from Reality. And it contains the single most audacious narrative move the show ever pulled. A feint inside a feint inside a feint that the writers built 3 seasons of foreshadowing toward, and then resolved in about 45 seconds of screen time. By the time the finale starts, Bill has won. He has the dimensional rift. He has merged the nightmare realm with Earth. He has imprisoned most of the town in a giant statue made of frozen, terrified townspeople. He has taken Ford captive and is torturing him for an equation that would let the weirdness spread beyond the boundaries of Gravity Falls. Around the town that Bill cannot cross, a hex placed there long ago by the natives who first defeated him. Bill needs Ford to give him the equation, to break the barrier. Ford refuses. Bill turns him into a gold statue and uses him as a back-scratcher. The Pines family, freshly reunited and operating out of the Mystery Shack, hatches the plan we discussed in the last chunk. Build a giant robot from the shack, drive it into Bill's fortress, gather the 10 Zodiac symbols, and form the prophecy wheel, defeat the demon. The plan fails, the wheel breaks, Stan and Ford get into a fight. over a grammatical correction, and the magic doesn't activate. Throughout the episode, Stan has been grumbling about the plan to rescue Ford, and still shows resentment towards him for not thanking him. And when he reluctantly joins the Zodiac, Ford correcting his grammar is the final straw for Stan, and he messes everything up. The prophecy that ancient civilizations carved into stone for 1,000 years gets undone in 15 seconds because two old men in their 60s cannot let go of a 30-year-old grudge for long enough to hold hands. Bill wins again. He scatters the Zodiac. He chases Dipper and Mabel through his pyramid fortress, growing larger and more monstrous as he goes, threatening to disassemble their molecules. The Pines twins are cornered. There is no prophecy left. There is no resistance left. There is no plan left. There are only two old men, a triangle, and one last idea. Stan and Ford have one final card to play. Ford has spent the entire summer studying Bill's weaknesses and discovered that even an interdimensional demon has one fatal vulnerability. Once he is inside a person's mind, that mind can be erased, and erasing the mind will erase the demon with it. The memory gun McGucket invented, the same gun that destroyed McGucket's own life, can be turned into the most powerful weapon in the universe. If you can trick Bill into entering a specific person's mind, you can vaporize him along with everything that person ever knew. The catch is that the person whose mind gets erased will lose everything. Every memory, every relationship, every identity. They will walk out of the cage as a stranger to their own life. Ford volunteers. He's the natural choice. He has the brain Bill wants. He has the equation Bill is trying to extract. Bill has been trying to get into Ford's head for the entire apocalypse. All Ford has to do is stop resisting, let Bill in, and let McGucket fire the gun. Ford will be erased. Bill will be erased. The world will be saved. Ford is willing to make the trade, and then Stan tells him no. The brothers swap clothes. Stan puts on Ford's coat and glasses. Ford puts on Stan's fez and undershirt. The swap is the same trick they used to run as kids in New Jersey. When their dad couldn't tell them apart, Stan walks out into Bill's fortress, wearing his brother's face. He calls Bill out. He surrenders. He offers his mind in Ford's place. Bill, who can see through every illusion in the universe, but has never been able to tell the Pines twins apart when they swap clothes, believes him. He gloats. He floats down to take the mind. He demands the equation. To defeat Bill, Grunkle Stan and Ford swap places, fooling Bill into entering the mind of Stan, and once there, Ford wipes Stan's mind, along with Bill. And it's incredibly emotional when Mabel tearfully tries to bring Stan back. Stan is illiterate in the equation Bill needs. Bill enters his mind expecting the secret of the universe and finds only a lifetime of pawn shops, bad fights, and a tourist trap full of fake exhibits. Bill realizes the trick a second too late. McGucket fires the gun. The mind erases. The demon screams. And Stan pines. The man who spent 30 years rebuilding a portal in a basement to save his brother loses everything in his head in order to save the world. The moment is staged with no dialogue from Bill in the final seconds. He just dissolves. He begs. He cuts a desperate cipher message into the air as his form decays, a message that, decoded, points to his post-finale fate in the prison outside space we discussed earlier. And then he is gone. The apocalypse ends. The nightmare realm pulls back. The sky turns blue again. The town wakes up. And in the center of Bill's collapsing fortress, an old man in a fez sits in a chair and smiles at his family with no idea who they are. The next 10 minutes of the finale are some of the most carefully written emotional scenes. In the history of animated TV, Mabel kneels in front of her great-uncle. He looks at her like she is a kind stranger. She holds up the photo album she has spent the whole summer building. The scrapbook Mabel started in episode 1. The book filled with pictures of Stan, Dipper, Mabel, Seuss, Wendy, the gnomes, the pig, the boat, the diner, the lake, the kids on Stan's lap, the mystery shack from 100 different angles. Mabel narrates the summer. Dipper narrates the summer. Susan, Ford, and Waddles, and the entire family circle around the chair narrating the summer to a man. who looks at them with the polite confusion of someone trying to remember a movie he saw a long time ago. Dipper, Mabel, Ford, and Soos reference the events of Tourist Trapped, The Legend of the Gobblewonker, Summerween, and Land Before Swine, while trying to revive Stan's memory. The episode titles being recited aloud are a meta-touch. The characters are reciting the show they are in. The audience is hearing the names of episodes they have seen. The family is trying to rebuild a person by listing the moments they shared, and the moments are the same moments the show has been showing the audience for 2 seasons. Every callback is doing 2 things at once: reminding the man in the chair who he is, and reminding the audience that they have been watching this family long enough that the callbacks hit. And Stan's eyes start to clear. Slowly, imperfectly. He recognizes Waddles first, then Mabel, then the rest of them, then himself. The memory gun was meant to be permanent, but the show pulls a small piece of magic out of nowhere. The connection between Stan and his family is so strong that erasure can't survive love. Stan's memories are restored mere minutes after having them erased. Even though the episode makes it crystal clear there was no way to restore his mind, and his mind being erased was vital to defeating Bill. Some fans, even years later, still call this an ass pull. The mind was supposed to be gone. The show contradicts itself for the sake of a happy ending. The criticism has merit on paper, but the scene works in practice because the show isn't really arguing that memory is restored by science. The show is arguing that family is the only memory that survives an apocalypse. The brain forgets. The heart doesn't. Mabel holding the scrapbook is the same Mabel who said Dipper would to Bill in Sock Opera. She knows what the answer is. She just has to wait for her great uncle to catch up to it. That's the trick inside the trick. The Zodiac Wheel was a red herring. The prophecy was a fake-out. The actual weapon the show built across 2 seasons wasn't a piece of ancient magic. It was a scrapbook full of bad photographs that a 13-year-old girl made by hand. The thing that defeats Bill Cipher is not knowledge. The thing that defeats Bill Cipher is the version of love that bothers to write things down. There's another beat in the finale that I have to mention, because it's the moment most fans cite when explaining why they cry every time they rewatch the show. After Stan recovers his memory, the family heads to the lake. The Stan-O-War is sitting at the dock. Not the rusty rowboat from earlier in the show, but a real ship. Refurbished, ready for an adventure. Ford has bought it. He's spent the summer fixing it up in secret, and he's asking Stan to come with him to finish the trip they planned as kids in New Jersey, to sail the world, looking for paranormal weirdness. To be the brothers they were supposed to be before Stan broke Ford's science fair project in 1965. Stan, who has been homeless, who has been a fugitive, who has spent 30 years alone in a basement, says yes. The 2 old men stand on the deck of a boat with their arms around each other, smiling, looking out at the lake. The Stan-O-War sails. The brothers finally get the ending they were promised. On a beach in New Jersey before any of this started. Mabel staring up at the ceiling in the final scene is enough to imply peace won't stay for long, even if it's just emotional peace, with Mabel worrying that she and Dipper will end up like Stan and Ford when they're older. Remember that line from A Tale of Two Stans? Mabel's quiet fear in bed. The fear that she and Dipper might end up like Stan and Ford. The finale answers her. The brothers got their boat back. The brothers got their friendship back. They lost 30 years to a grudge and a portal and a triangle, and they got a second chance anyway. If that ending was possible for Stan and Ford, it's possible for Dipper and Mabel. And the show, having shown the younger twins what their elders had to go through to get the boat, sends them home with the understanding that no matter what they choose, whether Dipper takes the apprenticeship with Ford, whether Mabel goes to art school, whether their lives diverge or converge, they have time. The summer ends. The relationship doesn't have to. The final scene of Gravity Falls is the twins boarding the bus back to California. The whole town has shown up to see them off. McGucket is there in a clean suit, the wealthiest man in Gravity Falls now, holding the keys to the Northwest Mansion. Pacifica is there, smiling, no longer pretending she doesn't know these people. Wendy gives Dipper her hat. Soos is wearing a fez and a suit because Stan has just handed over the keys to the Mystery Shack. Soos is the new Mr. Mystery, the new face of the Tourist Trap, the heir to the Khan. Stan and Ford are loading their bags onto the Stan-O-War in the background. The town is a town again. The weirdness is contained. The apocalypse has been folded back into the basement. The twins board the bus. Mabel pulls a sweater out of her bag, a pine tree sweater, the same shape as the symbol on Dipper's hat, knit by her own hands. She gives it to him. He gives her a knowing look. The bus pulls away. The mystery shack disappears behind the trees, and the credits roll over a final cipher that, when decoded, tells the audience to keep an eye out because the weirdness is bigger than one town. And the show, like Bill himself, might not be totally gone. That ending is so emotionally complete that the fandom has been arguing for 10 years about whether to ever ask for more. The show ended on purpose. Hirsch chose to end it. He could have made more seasons. Disney would have given him more. He didn't. He had a story. He told it. He stopped. That decision, more than any single piece of writing inside the show, is the final act of genius. He treated the show as a finite object. He trusted that 40 episodes was enough. And the show holds together so well, 10 years later, that the decision looks more correct every year. But we haven't yet talked about the part of the show that lives outside the show. The Cipher Hunt, the treasure map, the real-world statue of Bill Cipher buried in the woods. The book Hirsch published in 2024 in the voice of the villain, 8 years after the finale, that reopened the entire mystery. The show didn't just end, it expanded into reality. And we have to talk about that next. The treasure hunt that crossed 3 continents. In the summer of 2016, 6 months after the finale aired, Alex Hirsch did something that almost no creator in the history of television has done. He posted a photograph of himself standing in a forest next to a life-size stone statue of Bill Cipher. He gave no location. He gave no instructions. He just posted the photo and watched the internet lose its mind. The statue was real. It was hidden somewhere on Earth. After the series finale aired, a cryptic treasure hunt known as the Cipher Hunt led fans around the globe, solving puzzles and uncovering clues that culminated in discovering a real statue of Bill Cipher hidden in the woods of Oregon. The Cipher Hunt ran for about a month. It was an alternate reality game on a global scale. The clues were physical objects placed in real locations around the world, often without the consent or knowledge of the people who owned those locations. Fans had to crowdsource the search, share clues on social media, fly across countries to chase rumors, and work together as a single distributed organism to follow the trail. Players were directed to over a dozen different locations, with local fans activating to find the clues Hirsch left and figure out their next destination, with a wooden plaque at a shrine in Japan hiding one of the early clues in ciphertext, and other stops along the way requiring solving a 20-piece jigsaw of Bill Cipher, calling a number to respond to a lost pig notice for Waddles, and visiting Confusion Hill, the roadside attraction that inspired the Mystery Shack, to claim a jar of fake eyeballs using a secret passcode. The hunt began in Los Angeles. It moved to Russia, then to Japan, then to St. Petersburg, then back to the American West Coast. Each clue led to the next. Fans coordinated on Reddit and Discord in real time. The hunt rewarded collaboration. No single person could solve it. The final location was in a forest in Oregon, near the town that inspired Gravity Falls in the first place. A group of fans, streaming on Periscope, dug up the buried treasure chest under the watchful eye of the stone statue. Ultimately, a group of fans managed to find Bill Cipher's statue and dig up a treasure chest of rewards for their accomplishment. While streaming the experience on Periscope, and in addition to a plastic crown and sash coronating a member of their party as mayor of Gravity Falls, the chest contained a miniature Bill Cipher statue, a music box that plays the show's theme song, and a customized copy of Journal 3, and a USB drive with a message from Grunkle Stan. The contents of the chest were perfect: a plastic crown for a mayor of Gravity Falls, a music box, a signed Journal 3, a USB drive with a voice message from Grunkle Stan himself, recorded by Hirsch, congratulating the finders on completing the hunt. The whole event was, structurally, the most ambitious post-finale fan engagement campaign any animated show has ever run. Hirsch turned the world into the Mystery Shack and the fans into Dipper Pines, and they solved the mystery together. This wasn't a marketing stunt. There was no product launch attached to it. There was no new series being teased. The Cypher Hunt was a thank you letter from the creator to the fandom that had decoded his show for 4 years. It was Hirsch saying, "You spent your time on this. You cared this much. Here's a real-world adventure as a gift." The genius isn't just that he had the idea. The genius is that he committed to it. He paid out of his own pocket. He traveled to install the clues. He built a global puzzle box and gave away the key, the journal that became real. While the Cypher Hunt was running, Hirsch was also working on a publishing project that further blurred the line between the show and reality. He decided to produce physically the third journal, the book Dipper finds at the end of episode 1, the book that drives the entire plot of the series, the book with the six-fingered hand on its cover. He wanted to make it as a real object that you could hold in your hands, with every page, every cipher, every note, every illustration written and drawn the way Ford would have written and drawn it. The book came out in 2016. It's called Gravity Falls Journal 3. It is over 240 pages long. The pages are stained and aged. The handwriting changes when different characters wrote in it. Ford's careful script for the main entries, Dipper's quick scrawl for his additions, Mabel's bubbly markers for her doodles, and hidden in invisible ink only readable under a black light. Bill Cipher's mocking commentary on Ford's research. The book is a physical artifact of the show. It is also a lore expansion. Most of what we know about Ford's 30 years on the other side of the portal, about the Society of the Blind Eye's full history, about Bill's manipulation of Ford in the 70s, about Stan's wedding, which lasted 6 hours, came from Journal 3. The book is not a tie-in product. The book is canon. The Bill Cipher annotations are the genius layer. In the canonical copy of Journal 3, besides Bill's regular substitution cipher, Bill uses another cipher to further hide his sinister teasing notes and messages from Ford, with many of the symbols shared with the author's symbol substitution cipher, and the symbols decode to numbers, and from there use A1Z26. The villain wrote in the hero's journal. Ford didn't know. Ford couldn't see the invisible ink. Across hundreds of pages, Bill scrawled commentary on Ford's research in code, taunting him, gloating about his upcoming betrayal, leaving cruel little notes for the reader to find with a black light. Bill's decoded notes in the journal include lines like, "I've been inside your mind, Sixer. I know your secrets," and ravings about his desire to rewrite the laws of physics, arguing that rules are perversions against all will. "That's why I'm about to rewrite the whole system, buddy, and no one is going to stop me." The journal is 2 books at once, the book Ford wrote and the book Bill wrote on top of it. 2 voices in the same artifact. A scientist documenting the world and a demon writing fan fiction in the margins of the scientist's life. The book sold over 1 million copies. It hit #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. The Gravity Falls wiki has dedicated subpages to decoding every cipher in every margin. The fandom spent years cataloging what Bill wrote in the invisible ink, debating what each note meant, cross-referencing the journal entries against the show's continuity. Hirsch turned a fictional prop into a real publishing phenomenon, and the publishing phenomenon kept the show alive for years after it ended. The Book of Bill. And then, in 2024, Hirsch did it again. He published a second book, The Book of Bill, 300 pages. Written in Bill Cipher's voice, the villain's autobiography, his manifesto, his diary, his confession, his list of grievances, his cookbook, his attempts at therapy, his rants about other cartoon characters, his unreliable memoir of the destruction of Euclidia. The book is structurally insane. It includes interactive puzzles, ciphers, a hotline you can call, hidden text under flaps, blacklight messages, and a website that the book directs you to, where new lore is added as fans solve the puzzles in the physical book. Bill Cipher is sent to a tank outside of space where a deity known as the Axolotl resides, and the Book of Bill describes his stay in this prison, where the demon is finally being forced after 1 trillion years to actually sit with what he did. The frame story of the Book of Bill is that the demon, locked in his cosmic prison, has been writing this book as a final attempt to claw his way back into reality through the only channel he has left, the readers. He is writing it to you. He is trying to recruit you. He wants you to summon him. He drops hints throughout the book about how And the book, in its bibliographic structure, is its own kind of horror. A demon, defeated in canon, has been given a publishing deal, and the publishing deal is itself a piece of the demon's plot. For all of you still living in the world of Gravity Falls, Alex Hirsch has brought back his most nefarious of villains, Bill Cipher. And the Book of Bill is Bill's chance to tell his story, from his evil origin to an interactive array of puzzles and ciphers, all brought to you by the mastermind himself. The book topped the New York Times bestseller list for weeks in 2024. 8 years after the show ended, Gravity Falls re-entered the cultural conversation through a book written in the voice of its dead villain. Fans who had grown up watching the show in 2012 were now adults, and they bought the book in such numbers that bookstores ran out of copies for months. There's also the website. Hirsch launched a companion site called ThisIsNotAWebsite.com that contained additional puzzles tied to the book, and fans have spent the months since its release coordinating to decode the new ciphers, with some of the puzzles still being actively worked on by the community. The Book of Bill, like Journal 3 before it, is not just a book, it's a long-running puzzle. It refreshes, it updates, it rewards return visits, and there are still secrets in it that nobody has cracked. This is what we mean when we say Gravity Falls is genius. The show is 40 episodes long. The show is also 2 books, a treasure hunt, a website, an alternate reality game, a dozen unsolved ciphers, a real-world statue buried in a forest, a fandom that has built encyclopedias and decoded every backwards whisper, and a creator who refuses to stop adding layers to the work even a decade after it stopped airing new episodes. Most TV ends and dies. Gravity Falls ended and started a second life, as a piece of interactive fiction that the fandom is still living inside. The Disney fight, there's one more aspect of the show's making that deserves mention before we close. The genius of Gravity Falls didn't just survive Disney's involvement. It survived in spite of it. The fight Hirsch had to wage with the network's censors over the course of the show's run was, by his own account, brutal. And in 2022, he started posting public records of the fight on Twitter. Alex Hirsch released a video detailing some of his interactions with Disney regarding censorship of the show, sharing a video with voice acting of some of his email exchanges with standards and practices at Disney, where S&P asks Hirsch for such changes as removing Poopface, Lucifer, and a gag in which a basketball player throws a chimp through a hoop. The notes were absurd. Many of the censorship requests had no relationship to the actual content of the show, and instead reflected the censor's own anxieties about what children might think. The notes touched on the use of crud for having an inappropriate slang definition, on the word chube appearing on a character's Chube Pup t-shirt because chube has a sexual connotation, on a character dressing as a teddy bear being potentially problematic, as it may call to mind the people who dress up as stuffed animals as a furry fetish. The censors wanted to remove a t-shirt that said Chub Pup because the word chub had connotations. They wanted to cut Lucifer out of an episode because religious viewers might complain. Hirsch's response to the Lucifer note has become a piece of Twitter folklore. Hirsch responded to the Lucifer note saying, "I see no reason to change this. The devil isn't real." He refused repeatedly on principle, and most of the time the censors backed down. The harder fight was over the gay couple, Sheriff Blubbs and Deputy Durland, the 2 bumbling cops who patrol Gravity Falls and provide most of the comic relief in the police force, are, in Hirsch's writing, a couple. The show includes a number of small moments that imply their relationship. The episode The Love God included a scene where the 2 of them embraced and kissed briefly before Hirsch was forced to cut it. Standards and Practices requested the removal of a moment where the character Blubbs puts his arm around Durland, with a long-standing conflict between Hirsch and Standards and Practices regarding the portrayal of the relationship in the series. Hirsch fought for it. He lost. The on-screen kiss was cut. The implication remained years later, in 2021, when Disney started selling Pride merchandise. While continuing to censor LGBT representation in its actual programming, Hirsch publicly called the company out on social media for hypocrisy. The fights he had over Gravity Falls weren't only about the show. They were about a creator with values trying to make children's TV inside a corporate structure. Hirsch's main goal after Gravity Falls was finished was to take a vacation, a big one, and he spent about a year doing everything he couldn't do while he was serving solitary confinement at Disney. He used the phrase solitary confinement. That's the language a man uses. When he was trying to make a personal piece of art inside a machine that was constantly trying to file the corners off. That's part of the genius too. The show is what it is because Hirsch fought for it. Every Bill Cipher line that sounds slightly too dark for a kid's show is there because Hirsch refused to cut it. Every cipher that points to a metaphysical horror is there because the censors didn't know what they were looking at. Every Easter egg planted in the wallpaper is there because nobody on the standards team noticed it in the storyboard. The show snuck through the gate, and 10 years later, the gate is still pretending it doesn't know what it let inside. We're almost at the end, one more chunk left. And the last thing we need to talk about is what Gravity Falls actually was in the end. When you strip away the ciphers and the treasure hunts and the apocalypse and the demon and the genre tour and the foreshadowing and the censor fights. Because underneath all of it, the show is about one thing, and that one thing is the reason it's still being watched in 2026. Strip away the cipher wheel. Strip away the triangle demon. Strip away the cave paintings and the dimensional portal and the trillion-year-old genocide and the Pavlovian bell and the Hall of the Forgotten and the giant robot made of a tourist trap. Strip away the alternate reality game and the buried statue and the books and the websites and the censorship fights. What is Gravity Falls about? It's about a summer. It's about two kids who get dropped off at a place they don't want to be at the start of the season and don't want to leave at the end of it. It's about an old man who hasn't trusted anyone in 30 years, learning to trust two 13-year-olds with the truth of his life. It's about a brother who lost his brother and got him back. It's about a sister who realized that the brother she could keep wasn't the brother she actually wanted. It's about a hillbilly in a tinfoil hat learning to look at his own face again. It's about a rich girl ringing her own bell. It's about a town full of people who agreed not to look at what they had seen, and the kids who came along and made them look. Every supernatural element in the show is the wrapping. The actual present inside the wrapping is grief, fear, family, the passage of time, the cost of avoidance, and the unbeatable strength of the people who choose to keep showing up. The show says over and over in different costumes, in different genres, on different episodes, that the only things that survive an apocalypse are the relationships you bothered to maintain. Bill Cipher is undefeatable on paper. He is defeated in practice by a scrapbook and a punch. The scrapbook was Mabel's, the punch was Stan's. Both of them were small. Both of them were love. That's the central engine. The reason the show is still being watched 10 years after it ended, the reason the Cipher Hunt got people on planes, the reason the books became bestsellers, the reason a person born in 2005 can find Gravity Falls on Disney Plus today and feel the same way about it that a person born in 1995 felt about it in 2013. The genre wrapping is gorgeous. The puzzles are addictive. The lore is deep. But the thing underneath all of that, the thing the cipher wheel actually points to, is something every viewer recognizes the moment they see it. Family. The kind you're born into, the kind you find, the kind you ruin and rebuild. The show argues that family is the only force in the universe Bill Cipher cannot understand, and the argument lands because it is true. There's a final piece of the show's genius that deserves a paragraph of its own, because it doesn't get talked about as often as the ciphers and the foreshadowing. Hirsch and his team made a deliberate choice to end the show. They had the network's permission to continue. They had the audience to justify continuing. They had the merchandise revenue to justify continuing. They had everything a show needs to keep going. And they stopped. 40 episodes, 2 seasons, the end. That choice is, in the landscape of modern television, almost unheard of. Almost every show that achieves the kind of cultural traction Gravity Falls had gets squeezed by its network for more. Animated shows can run for 15 seasons. Live-action shows can run for 10. The pressure to extend is enormous because the financial upside of more episodes is gigantic. Hirsch said no. He said the story he wanted to tell was 40 episodes long, and he was going to tell it in 40 episodes, and then he was going to stop. The show ends with the twins on a bus back to California. It does not pick up the next summer. It does not skip ahead to a teenage dipper. It does not introduce a new generation of Pines kids who arrive at the Mystery Shack to inherit the mystery. It ends. It commits to the ending. It treats the summer as a thing that has to end in the show, because the show has been arguing for 40 episodes that summer's ending is the entire point. That's a piece of artistic discipline that the rest of the industry rarely matches. The willingness to walk away. The willingness to leave money on the table because the story doesn't need more money. The willingness to trust that what you made is enough. Hirsch trusted his own work. The work is enough. And because he stopped, the show has aged better than almost any of its peers. It is a complete object. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It rewards rewatching, because the rewatching reveals layers, not because the story has to be re-explained. Every time you watch it, the cipher wheel makes more sense. The rug looks more sinister. The Polaroids in the opening reveal one more face you hadn't noticed before. The show is a closed system. The puzzles inside it are finite. And the fact that the puzzles are finite is precisely why fans are still solving them in 2026. 10 years after the finale, Gravity Falls is, by most measurements, more culturally present than it was when it was airing. The fandom on Reddit and Tumblr has not shrunk. The fan art has not stopped. The merch is still on shelves in big box stores. The books are still on bestseller lists. The TikTok videos analyzing single frames of the show pull millions of views. New fans born after the finale aired find the show on streaming services and post about it like it's a new release. The show has crossed the line from popular cartoon into permanent cultural artifact. It belongs in the same conversation as Avatar: The Last Airbender, as The Twilight Zone, as the kind of work that becomes the language younger people use to talk about their own childhoods, regardless of when those childhoods happened. Despite a large fan base on Disney Channel, Gravity Falls ended prematurely after Season 2. However, despite the cancellation, the fan base has continued to endure and expand, with the show still being a hit on streaming. And this has clearly been noted by Disney, as during a mid-2024 interview, the executive vice president of television animation and Disney-branded TV revealed that the studio has talked with Hirsch about the future of Gravity Falls. Disney has not stopped trying to bring Hirsch back. They have offered, he has so far declined, to make more of the show. He has worked on other projects. He voiced King the Demon on The Owl House. He worked on Inside Job. He has not, as of this recording, agreed to make Gravity Falls Season 3. And the longer he holds out, the more the original 40 episodes accrete value. The show is genius partly because it stayed 40 episodes. The minute it becomes 60 episodes, some of that magic transforms. Maybe the new episodes are great. Maybe they aren't, but the closed system stops being closed. The puzzle gets new pieces. And Hirsch, more than almost any other creator alive, seems to understand the difference and seems to be guarding it. There's a line in the show, a small line, that almost nobody notices on first viewing. In the finale, after Bill has been defeated, after Stan has recovered his memory, after the family has gathered at the lake, Stan looks at Ford and says, "I gave up everything to get you back, and it was worth it." Ford doesn't say anything. He just hugs his brother. The two of them stand there. The Stan-O-War is at the dock behind them. The kids are watching from the trees, and the show ends basically on that line. It's the entire thesis of the show in one sentence, spoken by a character who has spent 40 episodes pretending he is too cynical to feel anything. He gave up everything. He gave up his name, his identity, his career, his freedom, his 30 years, his pride, and it was worth it because his brother is alive, because his brother is here, because the thing he gave up everything for showed up. That sentence, that one sentence, is the cipher key for the entire show. Every other element, the wheel, the journals, the mystery shack, the Easter eggs, the Polaroids, the cipher hunt is wrapping around that single proposition. People are worth giving up everything for. Not abstract people, specific people. The brother you punched in 1982, the sister who stole your journal in 2012, the handyman who looks up to you, the teenager who works the cash register, the hillbilly in the tinfoil hat, the rich girl who finally rang her own bell, the dumb kid who didn't yet know. He wanted to be a great scientist. Every character in this show is somebody worth giving up everything for. The show argues for 40 episodes in cipher and in plain text, and in horror and in comedy, and in apocalypse that the love you have for the specific weird people in your life is the most powerful thing in the universe. And it backs the argument up. Bill Cipher, the most powerful being in the show, the demon a trillion years older than physics, the creature who survived his own genocide and built a personality on top of it. Bill loses because he has never loved anyone. The show stages a metaphysical fight between a cosmic horror and a family of weirdos, and the family wins every time. In every variation, in the cipher, in episode 1, and in the scrapbook, in episode 40, the opening theme of the show whispers a backwards instruction to the audience. We talked about it in the first chunk. 3 letters back, switch A and Z, 26 letters. Every episode, a whisper. Every whisper, a cipher key. Every cipher, a message. Every message, a piece of the larger puzzle. The last episode does something the previous 39 don't do. It changes the theme song. The apocalypse version of the opening shows the Polaroids torn, the trees burning, Bill Cipher's face replacing the cheerful Pines family. The whisper at the end is replaced with something else, a different kind of message, and when fans decoded it, the message read like a farewell from the writers. The show was never just an animated series. It was a 4-year-long letter from Alex Hirsch to anyone who would slow down and read it. The letter said, "Pay attention to what's in front of you. Notice the small details. Trust your siblings. Forgive your brother. Tell your sister you love her. Don't run from the thing you're afraid of, because the running will cost you more than the thing ever could. The summer ends. The summer always ends. The thing you can keep when the summer is over is the people who sat through it with you and the scrapbook you bothered to make of the days you spent together." That's why the show is genius. Not because of the ciphers, not because of the lore, not because of the foreshadowing or the Easter eggs or the cipher wheel or the buried statue. Those are the magic tricks. The genius is the heart inside the magic tricks. Hirsch and his team built the most intricate puzzle box in animated television history, and the prize at the center of the box is the simplest thing in the world. It's a family on a porch. It's a brother on a boat. It's a kid in a sweater. It's a summer that ended, and the box is still being opened 10 years later by people who watched the show as kids and now watch it as adults and find that the answers it gave them when they were 13 still hold up when they're 23. The box is still being opened by people who watched it for the first time last week and immediately bought Journal 3 to keep reading. The box is still being opened by Alex Hirsch himself, who keeps adding new layers. A book here, a cipher there, a treasure hunt across a continent. Because the work isn't done. The show ended. The conversation didn't. 2 hours of Gravity Falls facts can only scratch the surface of what makes the show what it is. The 40 episodes are a starting point. The supplementary books are a second course. The fandom's collective decoding work over a decade is a third. And the show itself, the actual core experience of Dipper finding the journal at the end of episode 1 and stepping into a town that was waiting for him, is the meal you can keep eating for years. The meal that doesn't run out. The meal you can share with somebody new every time you rewatch. That's the genius. That's the whole answer. That's what the cipher wheel was always pointing at. A family, a summer, a goodbye,